Chapter 700. Zhao Jian was embarrassed and didn't dare to speak. Suddenly, he heard a cough, and the man said, "Vice Hall Master Qin's words are a bit too heavy." Huh? Then according to Vice Hall Master Zhong's meaning, he left my Ming Tsue Hall's disciples in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Should I thank him and not say a word? It turned out that the person with the pleasant voice was the former Hall Master of the Misty School's Ming Tsue Hall, Aunt Qin. Vice Hall Master Zhong laughed and said, "First, I think Vice Hall Master Qin should understand that the decision to lead the disciples into the Yulon Grand Canyon was made by the 3 Hall Masters of the Misty Hall. It has nothing to do with Zhao Jian. Second, Zhao Jian's martial arts are limited. It's already good that he escaped with his life. Even the lingering Fragrance Peak's female disciples can't take care of the Wuming Hall's outer disciples. We can't ask Zhao Jian to do what he must do. Third, we are now in the Shirxin Peak of the Fragrant Religion. There is no Ming Tsue Hall, let alone Ming Tsue Hall's disciples. There are only Misty Hall's female disciples. So Vice Hall Master Qin, please clarify." Aunt Qin was somewhat angry. The Misty Hall's disciples had suffered heavy casualties when the Misty School was destroyed. The remaining male disciples were below average. The female disciples of the Ming Tsue Hall were better. Under the Fragrant Religion's rule of favoring females over males, many disciples didn't dare to be ruthless towards the female disciples of the Misty School. Therefore, among the female disciples who were brought to the Fragrant Religion, there were many outstanding disciples who could become the pillars of the Misty Hall. According to the usual practice of the aroma cult, these female disciples would be put in an important position when they arrived at the aroma cult. However, in order to restrain Yang Rupeeing and divide the power of the Misty sect, Lingering Fragrance Peak chose one of the inner sect disciples to be the Deputy Hall Master of the Misty sect. And this Deputy Hall Master, Zhong, chose Zhao Jian from the many male disciples to be the key disciple to be groomed. The outstanding female disciples of the Ming Tsue Hall didn't have the chance to shine. Although Yang Rupeeing was the widow of the leader of the Misty School's sect master, O, and the direct disciple of the Fragrant Religion's sect master, she wasn't keen on fame and fortune. It was only because of her late husband's request that she reluctantly took the position of Hall Master of the Misty Hall and protected the safety of all the disciples of the Misty School. Because the female disciples of the Ming Tsue Hall had the advantage in the Misty Hall, she chose Aunt Qin to be the Vice Hall Master of the Misty Hall to help her deal with the affairs of the hall. This orchid dusk refinement was the first time since the establishment of the Misty Hall. Yang Rupeeing knew that it was dangerous and didn't want to send disciples in. However, this was the tradition of the Fragrant Religion. Secondly, she couldn't resist Vice Hall Master Zhong's persuasion. Thirdly, the relationship between the Shirxin Peak and the other peaks wasn't harmonious. Many medicinal herbs, elixirs, and other things were lacking. In addition, it wasn't only the normal disciples who came to the Shirxin Peak, but also the other disciples who were seriously injured. They were lacking in medicinal herbs. Therefore, after thinking it over, Yang Rupeeing finally agreed to Vice Hall Master Zhong's suggestion to send disciples into the Orchid Grand Canyon. However, Aunt Qin didn't agree. She felt that the disciples' martial arts weren't good enough, and they had just experienced a setback. It was time for them to rest and recuperate, so it wasn't good for them to take risks. However, under Yang Rupeeing and Vice Hall Master Zhong's insistence, she couldn't do anything. She even argued when selecting disciples to enter the canyon. Aunt Qin firmly didn't want some outstanding female disciples, such as Xia Zai and Chang'e, to enter the canyon. However, Vice Hall Master Zhong insisted on having his own way. He believed that only the disciples with strong martial arts could safely pick the spiritual herbs. They had to go. The 3 of them argued for a long time before Vice Hall Master Qin reluctantly agreed. However, he asked for Xia Zai, who had the highest martial arts, to be the leader. Yang Rupeeing naturally didn't have any objections. However, when they were about to set off, Vice Hall Master Zhong took out the cult leader's token and appointed Zhao Jian as the leader. He asked Xia Zai to cooperate with him. At that time, Aunt Qin was so angry that she almost vomited blood. Zhao Jian knew how to stir up trouble. On one hand, He was very panicked and didn't dare to accept Vice Hall Master Zhong's order. On the other hand, he pulled Xia Zai and asked her to take charge. In the end, under Yang Rupiying's suggestion, Zhao Jian and Xia Zai were both the leaders. Xia Zai and Zhao Jian would handle the daily affairs together. When they encountered difficult matters, Zhao Jian would take charge. When Zhao Jian set off, he even patted his chest and promised Aunt Qin that he would definitely bring back all the female disciples. When they heard the news of the beast tide in the Yulon Grand Canyon, almost all the disciples of the fragrant cult had died in the canyon. Other than despair, there was still a trace of hope. After all, they had taken different routes. Perhaps. However, when Zhao Jian came back alive and brought back the news that none of the disciples had escaped, Aunt Qin almost fainted. The strength of the Misty Hall had weakened by a lot. The female disciples of the Mingcue Hall had also suffered heavy losses. Thus, when Aunt Qin saw Zhao Jian's ambition, she couldn't help but ridicule him. However, Vice Hall Master Zhong's words were reasonable. The beast tide in the Yulon Grand Canyon was something that hadn't happened in hundreds of years. Even the outer disciples were completely annihilated, not to mention the disciples of the Misty Hall. Zhao Jian couldn't be completely blamed for this. When Yang Rupiying saw the two quarreling again, she couldn't help but frown. She said, "Hall Masters, please don't argue. This is a natural disaster. You are both thinking for the development of the hall. Don't argue." Zhao Jian said in shame, "It's all because of this disciple's stupidity. I couldn't share Hall Master's burden and even bet the lives of my junior brothers. I really deserve to die." When Yang Rupiying heard this, she smiled and said, "All right, Zhao Jian, you don't need to feel guilty. You have already done very well. Everyone has their own fate. Perhaps this is fate." Saying this, her tone was a little sad. Then, she raised her head and said, "The past is the past. We can only live well. Only then can we not let down the disciples who died. Don't you all agree?" Everyone nodded. Yang Rupiying said again, "Well, let's discuss the relationship with each hall. This is also a common topic, but there are always solutions that can be found. We can't exchange elixirs and herbs with the pill hall in time, and we have to negotiate with the heaven and earth hall for daily necessities." Just as they were talking, a female disciple suddenly rushed in like a swallow and shouted, "Good news, Hall Master, good news." When Yang Rupiying heard this, she couldn't help but feel angry. This was an important place for the Misty Hall to discuss matters. It was just like the discussion hall in the Misty School. The rules were strict. Back then, as the mistress of the Misty School, she couldn't barge into the discussion hall. Now that she saw a female disciple who didn't know the rules, how could she not be angry? However, that female disciple's words immediately extinguished the thought of punishing her. "Congratulations, Hall Master. The 3 disciples who participated in the Orchid Dusk refinement have returned. Furthermore, they brought back 4 carriages of spiritual herbs." "What? Is this true? Who are the surviving disciples?" Zhao Jian's face was ashen and his limbs were weak. Looking at the female disciple who rushed overexcitedly to report the news, his eyes flickered. Seeing that the 3 hall masters had stood up and asked in shock, the female disciple smiled and said, "The 3 disciples and spiritual herbs are still at the foot of the mountain." It was a senior brother from the Wooming Hall who rushed over to report the news. "Great!" Yang Rupiying's face immediately glowed. How could she care about the female disciple's mistake of barging into the Misty Hall? She immediately said, "Let's go. Bring me to see which disciple is so proud of the Misty Hall." After saying that, she rushed out excitedly. Aunt Qin was also anxious. She also wanted to know if her beloved female disciple was among the 3 people. While Vice Hall Master Zhong was shocked, he saw Zhao Jian's loss of composure and frowned. "Zhao Jian, Zhao Jian?" After calling him a few times, Zhao Jian finally realized and hurriedly bowed. "Vice Hall Master Zhong, what can I do for you? What's wrong with you? It seems like—" Vice Hall Master Zhong asked suspiciously. Zhao Jian rolled his eyes and said, "Vice Hall Master Zhong, this matter is a little strange. I was too engrossed in my thoughts just now and was a little rude." "Eh, what's strange?" not to mention the inner disciple. Even the pill expanding hall seems to have 4 carriages back. Zhao Jin whispered, Vice Hall Master Zhong, you have to think carefully. The pill expanding hall disciple came out with the inner disciple. He must have received the protection of the inner disciple or basked in the light. It's understandable that he could come out by luck. However, when this lowly one came out, the entire prairie was the world of ferocious beasts. This lowly one was very careful all the way, lest I reveal my tracks and be discovered by the ferocious beasts. Not to mention a carriage, I only brought back a single stalk of spirit grass. How is it possible that 4 carriages carrying spirit grass openly came out of the Yulon prairie without any ferocious beasts attacking? Even the inner disciple can't fight against these ferocious beasts. How can the disciples of the Misty Hall escape? Moreover, among the disciples who entered the valley with me, how many of them are better than me in martial arts? I can't even bring 1 carriage back, but they brought 4 with them. Isn't this strange? Vice Hall Master Zhong sucked in a breath of cold air and said, Zhao Jian, you're right. The more I think about it, the more suspicious it is. Let's go take a look. Let's see who has such great ability to be even more powerful than an inner disciple. After saying that, he left. Zhao Jian looked at the back and thought for a moment. He gritted his teeth and quickly followed. Sigh, I have to say that Zhao Jian is indeed a rare talent. His analysis is absolutely reasonable and infinitely close to reality. However, he didn't know that the one who made such a big move was not his junior brother and junior sister, but his junior brother's younger brother. On Shurxin Peak, after being depressed for many days, it suddenly glowed with vitality. All the disciples were standing by the side of the mountain path, talking at the same time while anxiously looking down the mountain. The sadness brought by the bad news a few days ago was slowly being healed by time. Suddenly, they heard the sound of carriages. Everyone shouted, "They're back!" Chapter 701. Under the expectation of the Misty Hall's disciples, the first to arrive wasn't a carriage from the Misty Hall, nor was it the Wuming Hall's senior disciple who was guarding outside the Yulon Grand Canyon. Instead, it was Senior Quan who was escorting Zhang Xiaohua back to the Tuo Dan Hall. Senior Brother Quan's face was a little gloomy, and he looked rather unhappy. Thinking about it, he had first made a trip to the White Mountain Peak and then immediately rushed to the convoy, escorting the inner disciples of the Lingering Fragrance Peak. However, when they arrived at the foot of the Lingering Fragrance Peak, they were still not allowed to go forward and were sent to the Shurxin Peak. No one would be happy. Behind Senior Brother Quan was another disciple with an honest face. Behind him were several carriages. There were more than 10 disciples escorting the group, all of whom were looking after the injured female disciple. There were only 2 disciples and 1 disciple who was driving the carriages. There were 3 disciples escorting Zhang Xiaohu's group and the 4 carriages. Behind the Wuming Hall's disciple was the burly Zhang Xiaohu. He sat in the front carriage and pretended to wave the whip. His carriage was in the Wuming Hall's encampment, and the horses were specially used to pull the carriage. Even if he didn't use the whip, the horses would still be very obedient. From afar, he saw the Misty Hall's disciples standing at the entrance of the mountain. The 3 hall masters of the Misty Hall were standing in the middle. Zhang Xiaohu didn't dare to sit in the carriage anymore and quickly jumped down. He pulled the reins of the horse and walked up the Shurxin Peak step by step. When Chang'e and Chun Chun saw Zhang Xiaohu get down from the carriage, they also jumped down and followed behind him. Yang Ruping saw this and was happy. She waved her hand and said, "Why aren't you hurrying to catch them?" As soon as her voice fell, the disciples who were waiting at the side rushed forward and said, "Senior Zhang, Senior Chang'e, Senior Chin Chun," and helped to catch the carriage. Yang Ruping walked up to Senior Quan and the others. Senior Quan didn't wait for her to come closer and quickly got down from the horse and saluted. "Greetings, Hall Master Yang." Yang Ruping smiled and said, "Martial nephew has worked hard. Please come in and have some tea." Senior Brother Quan said, "There are some things that I need to tell Hall Master Yang, so I won't be nagging you." After greeting Vice Hall Master Zhong and Annie Chin, He followed Yang Rupiing inside. Aunt Qin looked at Chang'e, who was surrounded by the female disciples. Although her arms were fixed, she looked very energetic and her complexion was good. Needless to say, Qinshan was no different from before they set off. Only then did she feel relieved and follow the crowd into the inner courtyard. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Senior Quan had already recounted what happened outside the Yulon Grand Canyon, as well as the matter of the escort. Soon after, he came out and bid farewell. Yang Rupiing looked at the disciples who were asking questions with a smile and shouted, "Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, Chunshun, come here." When Zhang Xiaohu and the others heard this, they quickly came over and bowed. "Greetings, Home Master Yang." Disciple Zhang Xiaohu fortunately didn't disappoint and brought back 4 carriages of spirit grass. But Yang Rupiing waved her hand and said, "Your senior Zhao has already told you about the other matters, so there is no need to say more. I thought that he was the only one who escaped with his life. I didn't expect that the 3 of you also came back. Moreover, you brought back 4 carriages of spirit grass. Your contribution is not small." Chang'e and the others quickly bowed and said, "Hall Master Yang is overpraising us. These are the hard work of our fellow disciples. We only brought them out of the Yulon Grand Canyon." Then he said, "However, due to the limited manpower of this disciple, even with the help of a Pill Repository Hall disciple, we could only rush back 4 carriages. Therefore, we chose some of the most precious spiritual herbs. Hall Master, please check." Yang Rupiing nodded and said, "You can be considered smart. You actually thought of using elk to pull the carriages. I really can't forget you." Then she waved her hand and said, "Pharmacy Hall disciples, come forward to check and register." When some of the disciples heard this, they immediately responded and quickly got on the carriages and unloaded the jade boxes. Some disciples went back to their rooms and took out pen, ink, and paper to register. On the side, Zhao Jian's face was constantly changing. He didn't know whether he should go forward or not. When he heard Yang Rupiing say that Zhang Xiaohu and the others used elk to pull the carriages, he couldn't help but ponder. Then, a smile appeared on his face. When he saw that the Pharmacy Hall disciples were busy, he immediately stepped out and walked to Zhang Xiaohu with a smile. He cupped his hands and said, "Junior brother Zhang, I really didn't expect that you could escape safely from the Blood Wolves. You were really lucky. At that time, I was chased by the Blood Wolves and thought that you... I am really not competent as a senior brother." Zhang Xiaohu also smiled and said, "What is senior brother Zhao talking about? This has nothing to do with being competent or not. At that time, the situation was so urgent. It was already good that I could take care of my own life." Hearing this, Zhao Jian's face relaxed even more. He still held Zhang Xiaohu's hand and sighed for a long time. On the side, Chang'e and Chunshun had already run to Aunt Qin's side. One on each side, they whispered something in her ear. Aunt Qin was also happy and held their hands, unwilling to let go. Chang'e was able to accompany Aunt Qin to escort Yan'an to Rejuvenation Valley. She was originally an elite disciple of Mingcue Hall. Now that she had come back from the dead and Mingcue Hall's talents had withered, Aunt Qin valued her even more. At this time, a burst of exclamations came from the disciples and attracted the attention of Yang Rupiing and the others. They walked over and saw that the 4 carriages that Zhang Xiaohu brought back were filled with extremely rare spirit herbs. Even the slightly ordinary ones were very old. This made the disciples of the Misty Hall, who had not seen much of the world, very surprised. Every time a jade box was opened, there would be a disciple who knew the name of the herb and its age, causing a burst of exclamations. This Shirsheen Peak, which had been deserted for a long time, was now so lively. Yang Rupiing and the other 2 hall masters smiled as they watched the disciples bustle about and exclaim in surprise. They did not stop them. To be honest, the amount of spiritual herbs in the 4 carriages was beyond their expectations. Even if all the disciples returned safely, they did not expect to gather so many spiritual herbs. Therefore, smiles hung on the faces of the 3 of them. Unlike all the other disciples of the Misty Palace, senior brother Zhao Jian's expression was extremely discordant. He clenched his teeth so hard that they almost broke. His fists and his sleeves were clenched tightly. Where did these spiritual herbs come from? Wasn't it under his wise leadership that the disciples picked them? This great honor originally belonged to him, and only he was worthy to stand in front of the disciples and enjoy the longing, amazement, and even adoration gazes. However, now all of this belonged to the direct disciple that he had always disdained and relied on nepotism to climb up to Peng's thigh. Zhao Jian's face was somewhat ferocious as he suppressed this voice in his heart. This all belongs to me. Zhao Jian glanced at Chang'e, who was hugging Aunt Qin's arm, and a trace of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. At this time, Zhang Xiaohu suddenly turned around and asked in surprise, Senior brother Zhao, why is your face so ugly? Are your injuries not healed yet? If you can't hold on, then rest early. There are many junior brothers here to help, so you don't have to worry too much, right? Zhao Jian gritted his teeth and said, Junior brother Zhang is indeed attentive. No wonder you were able to escape from the Yulon Grand Canyon, filled with beasts. My arm is hurting again. Vice Hall Master Zhong, who was watching from the front, heard this and said with a smile, Since that's the case, Zhao Jian should go back and rest. We are all here, so you don't have to watch. Zhao Jian glanced at Zhang Xiaohu and seemed to be worried. He forced a smile and said, Junior brother Zhang has worked hard all the way and hasn't said anything about resting. How can I, as your senior brother, take the first step? Moreover, junior sister Chang'e is also injured, so shouldn't she rest? Yang Rupiying was in a good mood. She turned around and said, All right, the four of you are injured. Go back and rest. Tell us about the matters in the Yulon Grand Canyon in detail tomorrow. Then, she looked at the pine trees in the distance and said in a low voice, Zhang Xiaohu, go and see your master. Well, he heard that you were buried in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Although he didn't say anything, his expression wasn't right. It was as if he had lost his backbone. We also just heard about your return and didn't have time to tell him. Zhang Xiao nodded and said, Thank you, Hall Master, for taking care of my master. This disciple will go and see master. After he finished speaking, he bowed to the disciples and walked toward a secluded place in the distance. After Zhang Xiaohu walked far away, Chang'e and Qinshin also left under the urging of Aunt Qin. Zhao Jian let out a sigh of relief in his heart. He looked at the excited disciples and thought for a moment before he got up and left. After he walked far away, Vice Hall Master Su nonchalantly raised his head and looked at his back. Then, he turned around and looked at him. In the square in front of the Misty Hall, there was a small door in the corner. It was very inconspicuous. Zhang Xiaohua walked to the door and pushed it open. In front of her was a small courtyard with some herbs. The courtyard wasn't big, and there weren't any houses. There was only a corridor beside the wall that led inside. Zhang Xiaohua seemed to be very familiar with it. She didn't even look inside the courtyard and directly walked into the corridor. At the end of the corridor was a pond, and there were several small bridges. After crossing the small bridges, there was a row of pine trees. Under the green pine trees, there were several rows of exquisite small courtyards. Zhang Xiaohu walked to the front of a small courtyard in the middle of the front row. He stood quietly for a moment and calmed himself down. He raised his hand and gently knocked on the courtyard door. After knocking a few times, he heard a voice from inside. Who is it? What's the matter in the hall? Come in and talk. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and pushed the door open. He stepped into the courtyard with light steps and reached the center of the courtyard in a few steps. There was a flat field in the courtyard. Now, a middle-aged man was holding a hoe. He was bending over and hoeing the field bit by bit. From the side, this person's back was a little bent and there was no sweat on his forehead. The hand holding the hoe was also abnormally steady. Although his steps were heavy, no different from an ordinary person's, his movements were methodical. Although he was hoeing the field, it gave people the feeling that he was practicing martial arts. Chapter 702. Zhang Xiaohu felt a pang in his heart as he looked at his master's calm demeanor. He walked to the edge of the field and stood there quietly. He knew that if it was before the ethereal sect was annihilated, Wen Hai would be able to hear his footsteps even if he was standing at the entrance of the small courtyard, let alone standing by the field now. However, when Wen Hai's dantian had been exposed by the masters of the Righteous Alliance, and his entire body's power had been crippled, although his foundation in martial arts was still there, and he was no different from an ordinary person when it came to farming and boxing, and even if he fought with others, as long as he did not use his internal energy, 3 to 5 people would still not be his opponent. However, compared to the powerful Hero 1 from before, there was still a world of difference. Fortunately, Wen Hai still had his disciple, Zhang Xiao, to teach. He was much better off than the others. "What's the matter?" Wen Hai was surprised when he saw that the person did not speak. "Master," Zhang Xiao saw Wen Hai turn around and saw a pair of lifeless eyes. It was very different from when he first set out. He immediately knew that the news of him being eaten by the wolves was a big blow to his master. His eyes were moist as he took a few steps forward and whispered, "I'm back." "Xiao?" Wen Hai was truly shocked. He rubbed his eyes to get a better look before throwing the towel on the ground. He hurriedly took a few steps forward before slowing down. As he walked, he asked, "Why are you only back now?" Zhang Xiao smiled. "I've made Master worry. I encountered a pack of wolves and did not make it back alive. But there were some unforeseen events, and I was lucky to escape." How could Wen Hai know the reason? He walked in front of Zhang Xiao, looked him up and down, and patted his shoulder. "Good. It's good that you're back. There are no external injuries, but what about internal injuries?" "I can't see them now. Everything is normal, Master, and—" He hesitated halfway through his sentence. Wen Hai smiled and said, "And what about it?" "Oh, Master, disciple had another encounter in the valley. I had a breakthrough in my internal energy cultivation." "Really?" Wen Hai was even more surprised. He smiled. "It's because the heavens have blessed my ethereal art that my Misty School's most powerful martial art has a chance to flourish. You have been practicing the ethereal divine art on the Shurxin Peak. Although you have made impressive progress, you have been practicing it too late. You can't be compared with others. Now, you have almost lost your life. But you are bound to have good fortune after surviving a great disaster. You have actually made some breakthroughs in your cultivation. Oomph, little tiger. I hope you can continue to work hard in the future and let others see the true strength of my Misty School's direct disciples." When Wen Hai's internal energy was now completely destroyed, his passion to revitalize the Misty School was all on Zhang Xiao. Moreover, the two were not too different in age. When Wen Hai not only regarded Zhang Xiao as his disciple, but also as a friend. Watching Zhang Xiao grow was almost like watching his own wish slowly come true. In the past, when he saw that Zhang Xiaohu's martial arts were not good and was much worse than the other disciples, he always felt uncomfortable. Now that he heard that Zhang Xiaohu's martial arts had improved greatly, it must mean that the gap between him and the other disciples had narrowed. Of course, he was happy and encouraged Zhang Xiaohu to continue working hard. He did not think that Zhang Xiaohu's internal energy cultivation was now much higher than the number 1 disciple of the second generation of the Misty School. Zhang Xiaohu had been adjusting his breath and trying to master his internal energy. Seeing that his master had misunderstood, he did not explain. This kind of thing would be explained slowly when he practiced martial arts in the future. As for meeting Zhang Xiaohua, Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Chun Chun had already discussed it on the way back. Zhang Xiaohua had changed her name to Rin Xiaoyao and was far away at Tianmu Peak. She had no connection with the Misty School and might not be able to see her in the future. Moreover, the Misty School was in an awkward position in the fragrance cult. It might not be a good thing to let Zhang Xiaohua contact the Misty School. They had all agreed to keep a secret, so Zhang Xiaohu did not intend to tell Wen Hai. At this time, when Wen Hai thought of something and asked, "Who else in the Misty School escaped with you?" Zhang Xiaohu's face sank and said, "Only senior sister Chang'e and junior sister Qinchin came out with me. The other disciples, although I did not see them being swallowed by the wolves with my own eyes, when they came out, it was the last moment of the Yulon Grand Canyon closing. Presumably, they will not be able to come back." Alas, Wenwenhai was somewhat sad and said, "It is the will of the heavens. In order to pick the herbs, we lost so many disciples. It is not worth it. Both the people and the herbs are gone." Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, "Fortunately, this disciple brought 4 carriages of rare herbs. Perhaps we can find a spirit grass that can repair the dantian." When Wenhai's eyes lit up and then immediately extinguished, he chuckled and said, "I have never heard of internal energy being able to be repaired. Don't comfort your master. Moreover, if we can find this kind of spirit grass, will the fragrance cult let us enter the valley?" Zhang Xiaohu was somewhat unwilling and asked, "Is there no way at all?" Shaking his head, Wenwenhai said, "There is no hope. Xiaohu, don't have any extravagant hopes. Unless..." Saying this, Wenwenhai was even more self-deprecating. "Forget it. Let's not talk about it. It is all a matter without a shadow." Zhang Xiaohu anxiously said, "Master, let this disciple know. What if we encounter it? How is that possible?" When Wenhai looked at the disciple in front of him, who was half a head taller than him, and said with a smile, "That is just a legend. When I was young, I heard Oda gang leader tell me a story." At this point, he seemed to be unwilling to talk about this topic. He looked to the side and said, "By the way, Chang'e and Chun Chun, these 2 little girls have also come back. I guess your martial uncle Shui still does not know. These 2 girls have a good relationship with her. When she heard that you guys couldn't make it back, she was really sad. You should go and tell her. Oh, and that Xia Zai, who has the best martial arts, didn't make it back either." Zhang Xiaohu knew his master's temperament. Generally, he would not have extravagant hopes for things that could not be realized. He was afraid that the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Now, to talk about the recovery of internal strength was simply a fantasy. Wenwenhai certainly did not want to say more. So, he nodded and said, "Yes, master. I have not seen senior sister Xia since the appearance of the wolf pack. She is probably dead. Alas, the talent is withering. Mingsue Hall was supported by instinct, but now it has suffered losses. Forget it. Let's not talk about it. You go and tell your martial uncle Shui. Hurry and rest. We will talk about everything later." Zhang Xiaohu smiled apologetically and said, "Master, won't you go with me? With you by her side, won't martial uncle Shui be happier? Hurry up and go. What are you waiting for?" Wenwenhai laughed and scolded. Zhang Xiaohu bowed and left the courtyard. Wenwenhai turned his head and looked in another direction. Then, he sighed deeply and went back to the field. He picked up the hoe and concentrated on his work. The night gradually darkened. The misty hall on Shirxin Peak was somewhat festive. After all, the return of the 3 disciples and the 4 carriages of precious herbs diluted the sadness of the past 10 days. However, in an exquisite courtyard, a handsome man was pacing back and forth in the room. His face was filled with anxiety. He was the disciple with the highest martial arts in the Misty Hall, Zhao Jian. Zhao Jian's eyes flickered and his fingers moved irregularly. It really showed the uneasiness in his heart. After a long time, Zhao Jian suddenly stopped and looked at the dark night sky. He gritted his teeth and seemed to have made a decision. He turned around and walked out of the room. He whispered to himself, "A man with a small amount of poison is not a man with a small amount of poison." Vice Hall Master Zhong was sitting on a chair in the same small room as last night. He was reading a book with great interest when he heard a disciple's report. Vice Hall Master Zhong was stunned for a moment before a look of understanding appeared on his face. He put down the book and waved his hand to let the disciple in. The person who came in was Zhao Jian. At this time, he had a card up his sleeve. His face was faintly red. Seeing that it was Zhao Jian, Vice Hall Chief Zhong smiled and said, "Zhao Jian, why are you not resting in the room or visiting Zhang Xiaohu? Why are you looking for me at this time?" Zhao Jian bowed and said, "Junior brother Zhang was able to bring 2 disciples and 4 carriages of spiritual herbs. He also saved a pill expanding hall disciple and an inner disciple. He must be exhausted and exhausted. Even the hall chief told him to rest more. How can this disciple disturb him? Besides, junior brother Zhang has made such a great contribution. In the future, his position in the hall will definitely rise. This disciple can't casually visit him in the future. Vice Hall Chief Zhong looked at Zhao Jian with interest and said with a smile, Zhang Xiao, who was able to make such a great contribution because of luck. You don't have to be jealous of him. His martial arts are far worse than yours. Even if the hall chief wants to put him in an important position, he can't be compared with you. When Zhao Jian heard this, he smiled and said, Vice Hall Master Zhong, what are you talking about? As your senior brother, I am also happy that junior brother Zhang has made such a great contribution. After all, those herbs were gathered by the disciples. Bringing them back is better than wasting them in the canyon. Why would I be jealous? Vice Hall Chief Zhong smiled and didn't say anything. Zhao Jian continued. Besides, Vice Hall Chief Zhong is also very right. Junior brother Zhang became a monk halfway. When he was 18 years old, he was apprenticed to Martial Uncle One to cultivate inner strength. This is too late. Although this disciple hopes that he can make great progress in martial arts and help me revitalize the Misty Hall, it's just a dream. But, speaking of this, Zhao Jian hesitated. But what? Vice Hall Chief Zhong was a little confused. But if Hall Chief Yang insists on putting him in an important position and wants to restrain this disciple may be of little help to Vice Hall Chief Su. Vice Hall Chief Su smiled and said, I've thought about this matter just now. But Zhang Xiaohu has made such a great contribution. If Hall Chief Yang wants to use him, it's like adding fuel to the fire. What can you and I do? Of course not. Zhao Jian shook his head and said, Don't you think that with Zhang Xiaohu's martial arts and knowledge, it's impossible for him to do so many incredible things? Chapter 703. Hearing this, Vice Hall Master Su was also interested. He leaned forward and asked, What do you mean, martial nephew Zhao? Zhao Jian was the disciple he had chosen to cultivate in the Misty Hall. Naturally, he would listen to his advice. On one hand, he could find out more about the disciples of the Misty School. On the other hand, he could see if this disciple was worth cultivating. Hearing Vice Hall Master Su's words, Zhao Jian smiled and said, Presumably, Vice Hall Master Su also went to Orchid Dusk Refinement when he was young. You should know about the dangers in the Orchid Grand Canyon. Vice Hall Master Su frowned and said, I know about Orchid Dusk Refinement, and I have also entered it. But it was a long time ago. I think I can understand what you mean. You feel that it is inconceivable that the three of them could come out. But since the disciples of Pill Tower Hall could come out, there is no reason why our Misty Hall disciples can't come out safely. Moreover, Orchid Dusk Refinement has a tradition of thousands of years in our incense religion. There are too many inconceivable things in it. Zhang Xiaohu's matter is not surprising. Zhao Jian nodded and said, I know that Vice Hall Master Su is experienced and knowledgeable. You have eaten more salt than this disciple has eaten rice. Moreover, the Orchid Dusk Refinement is held every 5 years. There must be a lot of novel things. But this time, this disciple really saw it with his own eyes. All the disciples of the Misty Hall were surrounded by hundreds of thousands of blood wolves. This disciple also relied on his painstakingly trained Qin Gong to escape with his life. Even senior sister Xia Zai, her martial arts is not much worse than this disciple's. But didn't she also fall into the wolf pack? What kind of martial arts does Zhang Xiaohu have? How could he escape with his life? And junior sister Chang'e and junior sister Chen Chun? This disciple really can't figure it out, no matter how hard he racked his brains. Can you confirm that they were really trapped by thousands of blood wolves? Vice Hall Master Su scratched his chin and asked in disbelief. Yes, this disciple can guarantee with his life. Moreover, I also saw a golden blood wolf king on the distant hillside. What? Vice Hall Master Su stood up and asked, Blood Wolf King? Did you really see it? Zhao Jian nodded. That's right, this disciple has never seen the Blood Wolf King before. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, how could I tell Vice Hall Master Su? Well, that's true. In the Fragrant Religion, except for the inner disciples of the Fragrant Religion, almost all of the ordinary disciples who saw the Blood Wolf King died. Not many people know what the Blood Wolf King looks like. Zhao Jian struck while the iron was hot. Therefore, it's impossible for this Zhang Xiaohu to escape with his life from the pack of blood wolves. Vice Hall Master Su shook his head. But he managed to escape. Then, since he escaped, why didn't he come out of the Yulon Grand Canyon earlier like this disciple? Instead, he waited until the last day to come out? Moreover, Vice Hall Master Su, among the ordinary disciples of Lingering Fragrance cult, how many of them can ride the elk of the Yulon Prairie as a mount and pull a carriage out of the Yulon Grand Canyon? Vice Hall Master Su was still speechless. Zhao Jian's words were extremely accurate. Even if Zhang Xiaohu was here, he wouldn't know how to answer. Then, Vice Hall Master Su's face changed and said in horror, "Don't tell me. You think Zhang Xiaohu is related to this beast tide? Zhang Xiaohu is related to the pack of blood wolves?" Vice Hall Master Su and Zhao Jian said almost at the same time. Then, Vice Hall Master Su couldn't help but shake his head. Impossible, impossible. How is this possible? You are all disciples of the Misty School and have only been in Lingering Fragrance cult for a few years. This is also the first time you entered the Yulon Grand Canyon. How could it be related to the berserk beasts inside? This is really inconceivable. Vice Hall Master Su, don't forget that Zhang Xiaohu is a direct disciple of the Misty School. In the previous generation, several direct disciples had their Dantian destroyed by our Lingering Fragrance cult, crippling their cultivation and becoming insignificant figures. In the third generation, he is the only direct disciple. If the Misty School doesn't have anything hidden up their sleeves, would you believe it? Vice Hall Master Su's face slightly changed. Moreover, after this disciple came to Shirxin Peak and saw many incredible things, only then did I know that the Misty School is actually a large sect like Lingering Fragrance cult. Think about it. How could the Misty School be so easily destroyed by us? Maybe they don't have any ulterior motives. At this moment, Zhao Jian was possessed by the spirits of the Lingering Fragrance cult, completely forgetting his identity as a disciple of the Misty School. Although Vice Hall Master Su was an inner disciple of the Lingering Fragrance Peak, he did not participate in the battle against the Misty School. Naturally, he did not know the situation. Hearing Zhao Jian's words, he could not help but be moved and anxiously said, "Do you really think that Zhang Xiaohu is related to the Beast Tide? Moreover, this is a plot by the direct disciples of the Misty School?" "That's right," Zhao Jian resolutely said. "Even if it is not a plot by the Misty School's disciples, it must be related to the Blood Wolf and the Beast Tide." Vice Hall Master Su listened and sat on the chair, his eyes staring at Zhao Jian. The cauldron lasted for half a cup of tea, making Zhao Jian's hair stand on end. Immediately, Vice Hall Master Su picked up the tea on the table, took a sip, and said, "Zhao Jian, do you think this old man is old and does not know what you are thinking? You just saw that Zhang Xiaohu had made a great contribution and threatened your position. So you are anxious and want to trip him up?" Zhao Jian immediately bowed and said, "Vice Hall Master Su, you are right. This disciple is indeed jealous of this guy. Clearly, this disciple was the one who brought people to pick the spiritual grass, but now it is his credit. However, this disciple was personally promoted by Vice Hall Master Su. How can this disciple not do his best for Hall Master Su? Moreover, compared to the business of the Misty Hall and Vice Hall Master Su's plan, this disciple's position is nothing. Isn't it just a matter of Vice Hall Master Su's words? I know that after Vice Hall Master Su came to Shirxin Peak, you have always been modest to Hall Master Yang and did not argue with her about many things. Under the premise of being modest, you want to complete the task given by the sect leader. This time, the Orchid Dusk refinement was an opportunity for you. Unfortunately, you encountered the Beast Tide caused by Zhang Xiaohu, which made your efforts go to waste. If you can catch the mastermind behind this Beast Tide, not only will you be able to turn the tide in the Misty Hall and completely defeat the Misty School's former disciples, but you will also be able to show your face in front of the sect leader and make a great contribution. This Zhao Jian's words hit the nail on the head. Vice Hall Master Su didn't care about the internal strife between Zhao Jian and Zhang Xiaohu at all. However, Zhao Jian was, after all, personally promoted by him, so it was inevitable that he would lend a helping hand. Moreover, being able to show his face in front of the sect leader was truly what Vice Hall Master Su wanted. Seeing that Vice Hall Master Su was moved, Zhao Jian continued, Zhang Xiaohu is just an ordinary disciple of the Misty Hall. Even if he was a direct disciple of the Misty School, his identity has long been outdated. If Vice Hall Master Su can find something from this guy, of course, it will be good. You're not only the benefactor of hundreds of disciples who died unjustly, but also the savior of the disciples who will participate in the Orchid Dusk refinement in the future. Think about it. If you don't get rid of the mastermind behind Zhang Xiaohu, who will dare to participate in the Orchid Dusk refinement in 5 years? A rush of excitement. This was the only feeling Vice Hall Master Su had at this time. He really could not imagine what kind of situation he would be in if he could really get rid of the mastermind behind the Beast Tide. This condition, this contribution, really made Vice Hall Master Su's mouth water a little. It was not surprising that Vice Hall Master Su felt this way. The fragrance cult had always respected the female disciples. Most of the inner disciples on the fragrance peak were female disciples. There were very few male disciples like Vice Hall Master Su, and his status was also low. If nothing unexpected happened, Vice Hall Master Su would be the Vice Hall Master of Misty Hall. Perhaps after many years, when Yang Rupiying was tired of it, the position of the Misty Hall Master would be vacant, and he would have a chance. The premise was that there was no resistance from the former disciples of the Misty School. Therefore, Vice Hall Master Su couldn't help but be greedy when he saw that he might be able to make a name for himself in the future. Once this greed was born, it became a situation where a single spark could start a prairie fire. Vice Hall Master Su's little bit of rationality was burned away. He only saw Zhao Jian gritting his teeth and said, Zhao Jian, don't think of me as a sword. You have to know that I personally selected you from the disciples of the Misty School. If there is no accident, your future will be 10,000 times brighter than Zhang Xiao's. Just based on his identity as a direct disciple of the Misty School, the fragrance cult will not allow him to do anything in the Misty Hall. These disciples all know. If Vice Hall Master Su had not been kind to me, I would not have come here today and would not have said these words. Zhao Jian, are you hiding something from me? Vice Hall Master Su shouted. Zhao Jian's eyes twitched as he said, Disciples' loyalty is as clear as day. How can I hide anything from Hall Master? To be honest, Disciple does not dare to believe that junior brother Zhang and the other two in the afternoon are real. I saw the disciples being eaten by the wolves with my own eyes. Vice Hall Master Su sucked in a breath of cold air and said, You mean that the 3 of them are not the original disciples? Yes, Zhao Jian said decisively. Perhaps Vice Hall Master Su did not notice, but when I saw Zhang Xiaohu in the afternoon, I paid attention. Although I did not directly exchange blows with him, but when I saw him jump off the carriage and walk, I felt that his martial arts had greatly improved. There is a huge difference from before. Is that so? Are you sure? Vice Hall Master Su's martial arts weren't on the same level as these disciples, so he naturally wouldn't care about the level of Zhang Xiaohu's martial arts. However, Zhao Jian saw Zhang Xiaohu as a thorn in his side, so he had already noticed it. With the sudden increase in Zhang Xiaohu's martial arts and the fact that he wasn't able to control it freely, it was inevitable that someone would notice it. Chapter 704. Of course, Vice Hall Master Zhong can rest assured. As long as you call Zhang Xiaohu over and check his cultivation, you will know. Vice Hall Master Zhong shook his head. This can't be considered as evidence. There are a lot of heavenly treasures in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Otherwise, it wouldn't have attracted the inner court female disciples of the lingering fragrance peak to enter the canyon for training. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohu's internal force cultivation is very low. Even if he doesn't use any high-grade heavenly treasures, it would be possible for him to increase his internal force. Zhao Jian was jealous. Why can't I encounter such a thing? Thus, he laughed. Vice Hall Master Zhong is thinking too much. Being afraid of wolves in front and tigers behind is not Vice Hall Master Zhong's style. How dare you? Vice Hall Master Zhong frowned and scolded. Zhao Jian trembled and quickly said, I don't dare. I don't have any other meaning. I just thought that if this matter is true, then this is a fat piece of meat sent to Vice Hall Master Zhong's mouth. If it is not true, then you can just wave your hand and let him go. Do you think he will turn around and blame you? He dares? Vice Hall Master Zhong laughed. He is just an ordinary disciple. In the eyes of your Misty School, he is only a direct disciple. But in my eyes, he is not even as good as you. Immediately, he made up his mind and waved his hand. Then tomorrow, we will take down Zhang Xiaohu and the others. I want to see what kind of trick they are playing. Zhao Jian heard that they were going to take down the 3 people and was happy. However, he hesitated and hesitated. Seeing this, Vice Hall Master Zhong angrily said, If you have something to say, then say it. If you don't want to say it, then don't let me see it. Zhao Jian flattered. Vice Hall Master Zhong is wise. At this time, I was thinking that if Zhang Xiaohu had some flaws and came back to collude with the martial uncles of the Misty School, wouldn't we be able to erase some of the clues we want to know? What if we tell Hall Master Yang tomorrow and let Hall Master Yang have a preconceived idea? Then wouldn't we be in a passive position? Here, he directly said we are passive, not Vice Hall Leader Zhong is passive. Obviously, he tied Vice Hall Leader Zhong to the same boat as him. Vice Hall Master Zhong gritted his teeth when he heard this, and his eyes narrowed as he said, All right, I'll listen to you. However, I'll make things clear. If you're hiding anything from me, then I'll absolutely not forgive you. Zhao Jian panicked and said, This lowly one only has a little bit of selfishness. Everything else is out of consideration for you. If he could take a step further, then wouldn't this lowly one be able to enjoy it endlessly? Vice Hall Master Zhong changed his expression and said, Humph, I know your selfishness. You can rest assured that as long as you are careful and loyal to me, even if this Zhang Xiaohu has nothing to do with the beast tide in the Yulong Grand Canyon, I will still take responsibility and protect you. Zhao Jian was overjoyed as he cupped his hands and said, I knew that following Vice Hall Master Zhong was the wisest decision in my life. All right, I already know about your loyalty. You don't have to keep mentioning it. After Vice Hall Master Zhong finished speaking, he took out a token from his bosom and handed it over, saying, This is a token specially bestowed by the sect leader. Take it and dispatch the law enforcement disciples to capture Zhang Xiaohu and the other 2 and send them to the dungeon. I'll personally interrogate them in a while. Understood. Zhao Jian was abnormally excited as he carefully took the token and turned around to leave. Vice Hall Master Zhong stared at Zhao Jian's back as he left and thought to himself, This guy is quite shrewd. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohu has the tendency to threaten him, he wants to find a way to restrain him. Isn't this old man also thinking of weakening the Misty School's strength? 50 disciples have died, but Zhang Xiaohu and the others have appeared. Will these 3 be able to implicate the other disciples? I'm looking forward to it. The situation in the Misty Hall was somewhat delicate. In order to control the disciples of the Misty School, the sect leader of the Fragrance Cult had dispatched Vice Hall Master Zhong Pei under Yang Rupiying. However, Vice Hall Master Zhong couldn't go into the Tiger's Den alone, so he had dispatched dozens of law enforcement disciples to protect Zhong Pei's dignity. Moreover, he had also specially bestowed a token. If Vice Hall Master Zhong had any objections to Yang Rupiying's decision, he could use this token to veto and delay the decision and hand it over to the Lingxiang Peak. Therefore, Zhao Jian took this token and led the law enforcement disciples to easily capture Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Chun Chun in the dungeon. When Zhao Jian was capturing Zhang Xiaohu, he had bad intentions. At first, he didn't let the law enforcement disciples come forward, but suddenly barged in himself. Zhang Xiaohu was circulating his qi and regulating his breathing, but Zhao Jian's sudden intrusion almost caused him to go mad. Moreover, Zhao Jian didn't answer and went forward with a fierce method, wanting to take Zhang Xiaohu's life. Zhang Xiaohu was confused and abnormally angry. When he saw Zhao Jian attacking, he naturally had to fight. As a result, without using any weapons, Zhang Xiaohu actually forced Zhao Jian to the point where he almost didn't have the strength to fight back, causing Zhao Jian to lose face. The jealousy in his heart, TSK, was really indescribable. Seeing that he was unable to cause Zhang Xiaohu's cultivation to go berserk, and that he had verified his conjecture that Zhang Xiaohu's martial arts had improved by leaps and bounds, Zhao Jian took out the token and called out the disciplinary disciple from outside. Zhang Xiaohu recognized the token and the disciplinary disciple that all ethereal sect disciples loathed and immediately understood what was going on. After all, in the Yulon Grand Canyon that day, the disciples of the Misty School were hiding in the small forest. The Blood Wolves only passed by from a distance and didn't discover them. If it weren't for the two inexplicable horse neighs, the dozens of lives wouldn't have been lost in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e whispered for a long time along the way, speculating about the horse neighs outside the forest. At that time, Zhao Jian and Xiazai had asked everyone to take good care of the horses. Who would want to die and let go of the horses? The two of them couldn't be sure. Even when Zhang Xiaohu heard that Zhao Jian was still alive, he didn't dare to think too much about it. He only had a little suspicion. That day, everyone was focused on running for their lives. So who would pay attention to each other? It was normal that he didn't see Zhao Jian's figure. However, at this moment, Zhao Jian actually brought law enforcement disciples from the Fragrant Religion to capture him. Wasn't this a blatant act of exposing 300 taels of silver here? Therefore, Zhang Xiaohu immediately stopped resisting and pretended that he didn't know anything. He smiled and said, "Senior Zhao, I don't know what mistake I made. I just returned from the Yulon Grand Canyon, and you brought law enforcement disciples to capture me? No matter what, we are still brothers who have gone through life and death together." Zhao Jian shook his head. "Junior Zhang, you have to understand. I also don't know what happened. It's just that Vice Hall Master Zhong wants to capture you. Please come with me. If you continue to fight, it will hurt the harmony between us brothers." Harmony? Zhang Xiaohu sneered in his heart. "If it wasn't for my great improvement in internal energy, wouldn't I have injured you?" However, his face was very warm. "How about this, Senior Zhao? Just now, a disciple came over and asked me to go see the Hall Master. I was just about to go over. Why don't we go to the Hall Master together?" Zhao Jian waved the token in his hand. "If it was any other day, I would definitely go see the Hall Master first. However, at this time, Junior Zhang should come with me first." Zhang Xiaohu was helpless. He knew that he couldn't win against the law enforcement disciples. Even if he made a fuss, he wouldn't be able to do anything. He could only wait to be captured. His acupoints were sealed, and he was thrown into the dungeon. Zhang Xiaohu was a direct disciple of the ethereal sect. Even though he had passed away a long time ago, he was still taken care of in the Shurxin Peak. His residence was different from the others, and no other disciple knew that he had been captured. However, capturing Chang'e and Chunchun was different. The residence of the two was usually forbidden to male disciples. When Zhao Jian and the law enforcement disciples entered, they naturally attracted the attention of the female disciples. Chang'e and Chunchun didn't resist, but when they were taken away, they were stopped by Aunt Qin, who had received the news and rushed over. However, when she saw Zhao Jian's token, she could only let them go. However, just in case, she sent several female disciples to follow behind the law enforcement disciples. She quickly went to Yang Rupiying's residence to seek help. Thus, Zhao Jian easily captured the three of them. However, just as he invited Vice Hall Master Zhong over, Yang Rupiying and Aunt Qin arrived as well. Looking at Yang Rupiying and Aunt Qin's angry expressions and stern questioning, Zhong Pei wasn't surprised in the slightest. He only smiled faintly and said, "Hall Master Yang is overthinking things." This one just suddenly felt that Zhang Xiaohu's group of three being able to escape from the Yulon Grand Canyon was very sudden and unreasonable. That's why I captured them and carefully questioned them. Yang Rupiang angrily said, I also want to ask them tomorrow. You just need to call Zhang Xiaohu and the others to the Misty Hall tomorrow. Why did you make such a big fuss tonight? Zhong Pei was still indifferent as he said, This matter is of great importance. Thousands of disciples in the Yulon Grand Canyon were buried in the stomach of the beasts. I was afraid that there would be some changes tonight, so I had to make such a hasty decision. You. Yang Rupiang was so angry that she laughed. You actually think that Zhang Xiaohu and the others are related to the beast hide? Isn't it? Zhong Pei's expression was still the same as he said, using elk to pull the carriage, 3 people with ordinary martial arts to bring 4 large carriages, and even saving an inner disciple and a disciple of the Pill Expanding Hall. Hall Master Yang can't even understand this. This is also what I want to ask tomorrow, Yang Rupiang said sternly. Then I will ask on behalf of Hall Master Darren tonight, so that Hall Master Darren doesn't have to worry. Seeing Zhong Pei so fearless, Yang Rupiang angrily said, Are you the Hall Master of the Misty Hall? Or am I the Hall Master? Quickly release them for me. Zhong Pei cupped his hands and said, This Misty Hall is naturally Hall Master Yang's Misty Hall. However, I was appointed by Sect Master Darren and had to deal with matters that Hall Master Yang can't bear to deal with. Zhang Xiaohu didn't give me a reasonable explanation about the Yulon Grand Canyon, so I can't release him. Good. Yang Rupiang said with a smile, I will send someone to the Lingering Fragrance Peak to report this matter to Sect Master Darren and wait for Sect Master Darren's decision. Hall Master Yang doesn't need to worry. I have already sent someone just now. Hall Master Yang only needs to wait calmly. Chapter 705. Yang Rupiang also said, Don't worry, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong. I'll immediately send someone to Lingxiang Peak and tell the whole story to Hierarch His Excellency. The whole story? Deputy Hall Chief Zhong sneered and said, I haven't seen Zhang Xiaohu yet, but Hall Chief Zhong already knows the whole story? Then, without waiting for Yang Rupiang to answer, he cupped his hands and said, Hall Chief Yang, I'm going to ask Zhang Xiaohu something. Will Hall Chief Zhong follow me? Yang Rupiang gritted her teeth and said, Forget it. Since Deputy Hall Chief Zhong volunteered, I'll leave it to you. You can report to me after you get the result. After saying that, he turned around and walked away. But when he was halfway, he turned back and said, I forgot that after Deputy Hall Master Zhong finishes his questioning, I may also have something to ask. Therefore, you can't torture Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Qinchin at will. If there is anything wrong with these 3 people, I will ask you. Deputy Hall Chief Zhong laughed and said loudly, Hall Chief Yang, if I don't torture them, how can I make them tell the truth? Do you think it's possible? Ha! Yang Rupiang ignored him and said, That depends on your means. You, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong was angry and stared at Yang Rupiang's back for a long time. Then he laughed and looked at the token in his hand with disdain on his face. This was a room similar to the dungeon on Bayou Feng, but there were burning torches on the wall. Zhang Xiaohu was sitting on a stool and looking coldly at Zhong Pei and Zhao Jian, who were walking into the cell. Zhong Pei walked to Zhang Xiaohu and stared at him for a long time. Then he reached out and pointed at the major acupoint on Zhang Xiaohu's chest. A stream of internal force flowed into Zhang Xiaohu's meridians. After circulating for a while, Zhong Pei said with a smile, Congratulations, Nephew Zhang. I haven't seen you for dozens of days, but your internal force has made a big breakthrough. Zhang Xiaohu narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, Please don't laugh at me, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong. How can my little internal force be noticed by Hall Chief Zhong? Could it be because of this that you captured me? Vice Hall Master Zhong shook his head and said, You started cultivating your internal strength late, and your foundation is too bad. Even if you ate some heavenly treasure in the Yulon Grand Canyon, your cultivation would still be at your current level. How can I care about it? Zhang Xiaohu was surprised and said, Vice Hall Master Zhong is wise. This disciple only ate a scarlet fruit in the Yulon Grand Canyon, which greatly increased my internal energy. Moreover, junior sister Changa and junior sister Chun also ate it. You will know if you ask. Hall Chief Zhong Tss was TTS Paises I. And I, TTSS have TTSS ask. Zhang Xiaohu glanced at Zhao Jian, whose expression had changed. He asked curiously, "Then why did Deputy Hall Chief Zhong bring me here so late at night?" Vice Hall Master Zhong said with a smile, "Zhang Xiaohu, don't try to avoid the important and dwell on the trivial. With your current inner strength, even if you eat 2 more cinnabar fruits, you may not be able to enter my eyes. You should tell me in detail what is going on with the Beast Tide in the Yulon Grand Canyon." Red fruit? Beast Tide? Zhang Xiaohu was stunned and said, "That red fruit is the legendary red fruit? It seems different from what I imagined." Then he said in confusion, "Our Misty Hall's convoy didn't encounter any Beast Tide, only a pack of blood wolves. This, senior brother Zhao, who led the convoy, knows it better than this disciple." Deputy Hall Chief Zhong didn't even look at Zhao Jian and said, "What Zhao Jian should say has been said. What I want to know is what happened to you and what you did. It's very simple. After we were discovered by the pack of blood wolves that day, we ran for our lives. However, we were still surrounded by blood wolves. This disciple, Chang'e, and Chun Chen's horses were faster, and our direction was different from that of the other disciples. By the time they surrounded us, the other disciples had already disappeared. Of course, this disciple and the other disciples were no match for the pack of blood wolves. After our horses were eaten by the blood wolves, the disciples were desperately trying to resist. Then we heard a loud cry in the sky, so the pack of blood wolves left the disciples behind and left. Deputy Hall Chief Zhong was dumbfounded. So simple. Yes? Nonsense. Zhao Jian, who was next to him, was extraordinarily angry and shouted, "Why didn't I hear it? It's simply nonsense. Hey, when we were surrounded by the pack of blood wolves, where was senior brother Zhao? How could you not hear it?" Zhang Xiaohu sneered. "Shut up. I didn't ask you to say it." Deputy Hall Chief Zhong turned around and scolded Zhao Jian, then asked, "Then why didn't you return to Shixin Peak earlier like Zhao Jian? Instead, you stayed there for so long?" Zhang Xiaohu said innocently, "Vice Hall Master Zhong, have you forgotten? Didn't this disciple say it just now? When junior sister Chang'e and junior sister Qinshan were hungry and thirsty, we ate the vermilion fruit and then fainted." Deputy Hall Chief Zhong was speechless. The vermilion fruit was only a legend. Many years ago, there were indeed inner disciples who had eaten it, but he had never seen it himself. Naturally, he didn't know the symptoms of taking it. There was no way to verify this. After thinking for a while, Zhong Pei said with a smile, "I didn't expect that junior nephew Zhang's method of making up a story is so first class. It's almost like a scholar writing a book, watertight. However, this is not what I want to know. You better tell me about the Beast Tide." Zhang Xiaohu furrowed his brows. The plot that he came up with was something that he and Chang'e had come up with. They only blamed everything on that loud cry. Anyway, they had heard it before, and besides them, there were no other living people, so it was impossible for them to verify it. When they left the valley, they heard that Zhao Jian had also escaped danger. They were surprised, but the matter of repelling the blood wolves was indeed inhumane. They didn't have any good ideas, and after thinking about it, it was just like that. Anyway, 3 people's words were more credible than one person's, and there might not be anyone who would really investigate. However, Zhang Xiaohu and the others didn't expect that someone would really investigate the details. At this point, they could only bite the bullet and continue. Anyway, Zhang Xiaohua's matter must not be mentioned. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohu also knew that the status of female disciples in the Misty School was different. Even if Chang'e and Qinshan were captured, Deputy Hall Chief Su wouldn't do anything to them. He could only grit his teeth and bite the bullet. That was it. Who could do anything about it? However, at this time, Deputy Hall Chief Su didn't care about the blood wolves, but mentioned the Beast Tide, which really made Zhang Xiaohu puzzled. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohu probed, "I don't know what Deputy Hall Chief Su wants to know about the Beast Tide. I was with Senior Brother Zhao before I encountered the Blood Wolves, so I should know less than Senior Brother Zhao. That's all on the surface. Zhao Jian is just an ordinary disciple of your Misty School. How would he know the core secrets of your Misty School? Your Misty School is also a big sect. Don't tell me you don't have any secrets? Or don't you have any means to cause a beast tide? Of course, I know that you have only been in the sect for a short period of time. You may not have any feelings for the ethereal sect, but you did it because of someone's instigation. If you say it, yes, even if you say it's a name, this hall will let you go immediately. Don't worry, not to mention the merit of your report. Even if you bring back 4 carriages full of spirit herbs, this hall will be lenient with you. Don't you want to say 1 or 2 names? You. Zhang Xiaohu was angry. At this time, he knew that Deputy Hall Chief Zhong's plan was to wipe out the Misty School's forces in one fell swoop. Moreover, he even used the beast tide as a reason. What is a beast tide? It is related to the lives of thousands of disciples of the fragrant religion. Not to mention that Zhang Xiaohu didn't know the whole story. Even if he knew that it was related to the Misty School, he would absolutely not say it. Deputy Hall Chief Su really thinks highly of this disciple. How could this disciple provoke a beast tide? There is no one behind me who instigated it. Zhang Xiaohu said coldly, but resolutely. But how do you explain how you drove the 4 carriages from the east to the Yulon Grand Canyon? Well, using elk as mounts, you drove the carriages to the south exit? That's across the entire Yulon Prairie. How could you not encounter any ferocious beast? Don't tell me that with your martial arts, you are invincible in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Ha. Zhang Xiaohu was speechless. This was the truth. He regretted not listening to Zhang Xiaohua's advice in the Yulon Grand Canyon. He could only smile and say, perhaps this disciple's character is good, or perhaps it is the blessing of our Misty Hall. This disciple really didn't encounter any ferocious beast. Seeing Zhang Xiaohu push the blame away, Deputy Hall Chief Su didn't get angry. Instead, he confidently said, Marshal Nephew Zhang, you are our hall's younger generation. We don't want to be too strict with you. If you are an outstanding person, you should be able to adapt to the current situation. Chapter 706. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohu was stubborn and did not tell him what he wanted to know, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong was not surprised. He took half a step back and waved his hand. Several law enforcement disciples came up from behind. They lifted Zhang Xiaohu up and hung him straight on the torture instrument, just like Bai Huan. Zhang Xiaohu's major acupoints were sealed and his limbs were weak, so he could only be at the mercy of the law enforcement disciples. After they put him down, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong stepped forward and said with a smile, Marshal Nephew Zhang, I don't want to embarrass you. After all, you are different from He Tian Shu. You are a famous figure in the Misty Hall and also a direct disciple of Wenwen Hai. If you can cooperate with me and tell me the secret about the beast tide, I will let you go immediately. We will still have a harmonious relationship as uncle and nephew. In the future, our hall will also take care of you. Zhang Xiaohu looked at him indifferently, with a kind of disdain in his eyes. Seeing this, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong tactfully shut up and did not want to say another word. He turned to the law enforcement disciples and said, let him have a taste of the punishment of our fragrance cult. A law enforcement disciple stepped forward and picked up a long, half-foot-long steel needle from the blood-stained stone table. He walked up to Zhang Xiaohu, tore open Zhang Xiaohu's clothes, aimed at his armpit, and was about to stab him. Deputy Hall Chief Zhong paid attention to the changes in Zhang Xiaohu's expression. Seeing that the steel needle was about to pierce into his body, Zhang Xiaohu just narrowed his eyes and prepared himself for the pain. He did not seem to want to beg for mercy at all. Feeling a little angry, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong raised his hand and said, wait a moment. The law enforcement disciple stopped. Then Deputy Hall Chief Zhong said, don't make him bleed first. Didn't Hall Chief Yang say that she wants to ask more questions? Let's pick up the ones who won't get hurt first. Yes. The law enforcement disciple threw away the steel needle and raised his hand to touch one of Zhang Xiaohu's acupoints. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohu felt a kind of numbness and swelling, as if crazy ants were biting his bones. Zhang Xiaohu twisted his body hard, trying to get rid of this unbearable feeling. He also gritted his teeth. After a long while, Zhang Xiaohu's face turned pale and large beads of sweat appeared on his head. Seeing this, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong stepped forward and said with a smile, "How about it?" Zhang Xiaohu had not tasted this feeling. To tell you the truth, this is just the beginning. It's just an appetizer. If you agree, we'll stop now and let you redeem yourself. Otherwise, there's still many more dishes waiting for you. Think about He Tianshu. He's your role model. Zhang Xiaohu gritted his teeth and tried his best not to make a sound. He stared fiercely at Zhong Pei. Seeing this, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong continued, "Don't try to be brave. Although we won't make you bleed today, that might not be the case in the future. As for Hall Chief Yang, she can protect you now, but she can't protect you forever. As long as you don't say anything, I will use different methods to deal with you. When my patience runs out, not to mention seeing blood, even your life will be hard to protect." After saying this, he no longer hesitated and turned his head. "You guys, take out your best skills and serve this Misty School's direct disciple well." Then he said to Zhao Jian, "You stay here and watch. I will go and ask the two female disciples." Hearing this, Zhao Jian smiled and bowed. "Deputy Hall Chief Zhong, don't worry. Once Zhang Xiaohu speaks, I will immediately report to you." Zhong Pei nodded and walked away. The entire prison cell was filled with screams that Zhang Xiaohu tried his best to hold back, but he couldn't hold it in any longer. After an unknown period of time, the whole cell fell into silence. When Zhang Xiaohu woke up from his coma, the whole cell was empty. Only the torch on the wall was still burning. Zhang Xiaohu raised his head with great difficulty and looked around in exhaustion. At this moment, although he didn't seem to have any injuries on the surface, the inside of his body, regardless of whether it was his internal organs or his limbs, they were all filled with pain. It was an unbearable pain. He let out a few soft groans and let out a sigh in his heart. He really didn't expect that his choice at that time would bring him such a big disaster. However, thinking of the surprise and joy of the disciples when they saw the magic herb in the carriage in the afternoon, Zhang Xiaohu couldn't help but think, "If I were given another choice, I would still do the same." But I don't know if Chang'e and Chun Chun have encountered the same thing. When Zhang Xiaohu thought of Chang'e, his heart ached. Her injuries haven't healed yet. Won't it be more serious if she suffers more? Just as he was thinking about it, a soft sizzle sound suddenly rang out in the quiet prison cell. Zhang Xiaohu raised his head and looked towards the source of the sound. It was a figure who had pushed open the iron door of the prison cell and walked in softly. When the person came closer, Zhang Xiaohu saw it clearly. Wasn't it Zhao Jian, Senior Zhao? When Zhang Xiaohu saw him, he didn't say anything and lowered his head. He didn't see him. Zhao Jian walked in front of Zhang Xiaohu and said earnestly, "Junior brother Zhang, you know that I'm not trying to make things difficult for you. Vice Hall Master Zhong is a figure on Lingxiang Peak. If he wants to know, you have to tell him even if you don't want to. You'd better tell him everything you know. Not only can you avoid physical pain, but you can also win his favor. Isn't this the best of both worlds? If she's tied up like this, won't her injuries worsen? You must take good care of her. You little girl, instead of thinking about yourself, you're thinking about other people. Senior sister Chang'e and senior brother Zhang protected me when the blood wolves attacked. If it weren't for the two of them, I would have been food for the blood wolves. Naturally, I have to think about them. And senior brother Zhang, I don't know how he is now. Alas, Zhong Pei took out the token of the hierarch and captured the three of you here. I can't do anything. Chang'e is fine. She's right next to you. Zhong Pei doesn't dare to touch her. It's a pity that Zhang Xiaohu will suffer physical pain. Hall Master, senior brother Zhang, is a good person. You must save him." Qin Shan was shocked and begged bitterly. And Qin also said, "Hall Master Yang, since you already know that there are many suspicious points, why don't you ask Zhang Xiaohu first, or tell Zhong Pei about this and let him know?" Yang Rupiying smiled bitterly. Zhongpei may not know. It's because he knows that he dares to do this. Didn't you hear what he said? Finding the cause of the beast tide is related to the lives of thousands of disciples of the incense cult. This is enough to make him hot-headed and do a lot of incredible things. He also has the token of the hierarch. I have no suitable reason to stop him. Chapter 707. After thinking for a moment, Yang Rupiying smiled and said, I've already told him that I need to ask Zhang Xiaohu personally. If I don't go, he won't be able to be ruthless. After all, if he leaves me aside, he will be the first to lose his reason. In the future, he won't be able to gain the upper hand. Aunt Qin listened thoughtfully, but there was some worry in her eyes. When Qin heard this, he didn't understand at all. He was only thinking about how to tell Yang Rupiying the reason that his senior brother and senior sister had made up. Yang Rupiying underestimated Zhongpei and didn't expect Zhao Jian to be so vicious. Just when she thought that everything was under control, Zhongpei had already made a ruthless move, wanting to get what he wanted from Zhang Xiao's mouth. Zhao Jian wanted to kill him, but after weighing the pros and cons, he took a step back and crippled Zhang Xiaohu's internal strength. After all, there were many ways to interrogate. It was inevitable to make a mistake. Even if Zhongpei knew, what was done could not be undone. At most, he would be scolded. Perhaps this would be to his advantage. He might even be rewarded. In the next few days, the disciples that Yang Rupiying and Zhongpei sent to Lingering Fragrance Peak didn't return, nor did they send any orders. Yang Rupiying only protected Chang'e and Shun from being tortured, but Zhang Xiaohu in another part of the dungeon suffered a great punishment. Since his dantian was broken by Zhang Xiaohu that day, Zhang Xiaohu's decades of cultivation had been lost. However, the major acupoints on his body hadn't been opened, so the law enforcement disciples didn't realize that his internal strength had been crippled. They still took turns to torture him, and Zhang Xiaohu also wanted it. From the initial screams to the later groans, he clenched his teeth and blood flowed from the corners of his mouth, but he didn't make a sound. At first, Zhao Jian was worried that his shady methods would be discovered. However, after 2 days, there was no movement. He became even bolder and followed behind the law enforcement disciples. Sometimes, he would even personally go into battle to practice his interrogation techniques. On the 7th day, the disciples sent by Yang Rupiying and Zhongpei came back and said that they had already explained the reason to the inner sect disciples. The disciples also reported this matter to the sect master, but the sect master didn't give any instructions and just asked them to come back. Yang Rupiying and Aunt Qin looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know what kind of medicine the cult leader was selling in his gourd. Yang Rupiying even wanted to personally go to Lingxiang Peak to ask, but she was afraid that as soon as she left Shixin Peak, Zhang Xiaohu and the others' lives would be in danger. On the other hand, when Zhongpei heard his disciples' report, he couldn't help being wild with joy. Wasn't this an obvious signal? The cult leader agreed with his point of view and did not bring back any instructions, which was tacit approval. Therefore, Zhongpei seemed to have seen the cult leader's smiling face on Lingering Fragrance Peak when he was at Shixin Peak, which made him even more energetic. It didn't matter if he was full of energy, but Zhang Xiaohu was unlucky. In the first 7 days, Zhongpei was still very restrained. He only asked the law enforcement disciples to use some methods that couldn't see the scars so that he could give an explanation to Yang Rupiying. Now that he had the cult leader's tacit approval, he seemed to be more unscrupulous. The first thing he did was to serve Zhang Xiaohu with a poisonous whip. 72 lashes. He whipped Zhang Xiaohu's body until it was badly mutilated, and he fainted a few times. Poor Zhang Xiaohu. He was already 25 years old. When had he ever been subjected to such a cruel punishment? Even when he came from Guozhuang House to Pingyang City, he had to endure the supercilious looks and difficulties of others. It was just some of the fickleness of the human world. Later, when he became a direct disciple of the Misty School, he was flattered by others, which was hard to come by. Then, when the Misty School was destroyed, although he was a direct disciple, his martial arts were weak. He fought with others for only a few moves before his acupoints were sealed and he was kicked to the side. Others died, but he only had the oily skin on his head broken. The most dangerous thing was the battle with the blood wolf in the Yulon Grand Canyon. He almost died in the wolf's belly. But even in that battle, there was a long song by his side. There was the lingering beauty and the heart-stirring heroic spirit. It only highlighted the heroic struggle between man and beast. In this dark and gloomy dungeon, all his martial arts were crippled, and he became a useless person who could no longer practice martial arts. A few days ago, he was still full of heroic spirit and almost wanted to point out the world. But now, he had fallen from the clouds into the swamp. The smelly mud polluted his mouth and nose, making Zhang Xiaohu breathless. He really wanted to die. On the other hand, his body was also going through unprecedented torture from inside out. The pain made him faint a few times every day. This pain directly hit his heart and made his heart stronger. One time, when he woke up from his coma, he felt the disappointment in his heart and the pain in his body. Suddenly, a sentence came into Zhang Xiaohu's mind. For a person of great power, he must first suffer hardships in his heart, toil his muscles and bones, starve his skin and empty his body. Wasn't this what Li Jinfeng often said? When Zhang Xiaohu heard it, he didn't understand. When he understood the meaning, he felt that it was pedantic. He only thought that it was a scholar working behind closed doors. But now, when he thought about it, it was like sweet dew that moistened his withered heart and killed the gradually budding will to die. Thus, this whipping, this torture, in Zhang Xiaohu's eyes, gradually became a method to train him. His will became stronger and stronger under this test. Zhang Xiaohu, this seedling that had never experienced wind and rain, was now gradually growing under the ravages of Zhongpei and Zhao Jian. Just as Zhang Xiaohu was being whipped in the dungeon of Shixin Peak, Zhang Xiaohua on Tianmu Peak was also being ravaged. However, the person who was ravaging Zhang Xiaohua was not anyone else, but himself. That day, after Zhang Xiaohua killed Deputy Hall Master Su, he escaped back to Tianmu Peak. The next morning, he met Qin Fengxiao and Wu Zhouxiu who came to visit. He thought that the news had been leaked, but looking at the two of them, it was nothing out of the ordinary. But after the two of them left, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. Since he was pretending to be injured, then he could only pretend till the end to avoid attracting the attention of Tianmu Peak or Lingering Fragrance Peak. However, Zhang Xiaohua's meridians were healing day by day, and the disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak had yet to appear. Even the disciples of Baiwa Peak's Pill Expanding Hall didn't come to Tianmu Peak to test Zhang Xiaohua. This put Zhang Xiaohua in a difficult position. He had no choice. Every day when he woke up, he looked at his healed meridians and internal injuries. He could only forcefully circulate his internal energy to expand his meridians or use other methods to aggravate his injuries to ensure that he was injured. Day after day of destruction, until 7 days later, there was still no news or movement. On this day, Zhang Xiaohua was furious. Every time he injured himself, he would recover extremely quickly the next day. In the past few days, the recovery speed of his meridians had sped up again. It seemed that the meridians in his body had adapted to his injuries. Fine, I don't care who it is. This Xiaoxia is already like this. If it really doesn't work, I will learn from Huan Huan and find a place to hide. Who would have the patience to serve you? Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself. Hence, he didn't create any more obstacles. His injuries healed rapidly day by day. Could it be that something went wrong? Deputy Hall Master Su's corpse wasn't discovered? Or he wasn't killed? That can't be right. If he wasn't killed, wouldn't I be in danger? The disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak should have come long ago. If he wasn't discovered, then who took him away? I remember that the restriction was removed at that time. Every time Zhang Xiaohua thought of this peaceful scene, his imagination would run wild. Alas, Zhang Xiaohua had overestimated his own influence and underestimated the strength of the Lingering Fragrance cult. Zhang Xiaohua was just a little medicine boy of Tianmu Peak. Even if he had saved a few disciples of Tuaw Dan Hall, in the eyes of the disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak, it wasn't a matter at all. It was absolutely insignificant. It was even more impossible for them to link him with Deputy Hall Master Su's death. Moreover, he was seriously injured the moment he returned to Tianmu Peak. Even if Chun Fengxiao and Wu Zhoushu knew a little about the grudge between Deputy Hall Master Su and Zhang Xiaohua, it was only a fleeting thought in their minds. He was injured to the point of vomiting blood. How could he run to Baiyu Peak to kill someone? Even if he wasn't injured, one was an inner disciple while the other was a little medicine boy. This was absolutely not proportionate. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua had wasted such a long time in vain. They simply didn't put him in the scope of suspicion. Moreover, the news of Deputy Hall Master Su's death had spread to Lingering Fragrance Peak. Lingering Fragrance Peak was naturally quite shocked. After all, there were only a few people who could be a Hall Master. Deputy Hall Master Su's martial arts was also high. His inexplicable death naturally aroused suspicion. However, Deputy Hall Master Su originally had a background. Although he was usually very careful, there would always be some clues in the place where he lived. How could the inner disciples and disciplinary hall's disciples not find any clues if they carefully checked? Therefore, it was very easy for them to treat Deputy Hall Master Su's death as something related to the Lingering Fragrance cult and other sections. Since their starting point was wrong, of course they wouldn't find Zhang Xiaohua's head. On this day, Zhang Xiaohua stretched his body as he walked out of the house. Immediately, several disciples gathered in front of him. They were all laughing and talking at the same time. Junior Brother Run, have you rested well? Junior Brother Run, how is your body recovering? I have here the great revitalizing pill from Lingering Fragrance Peak. How about I give it to you first? When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he immediately had a headache. Since a few days ago, Zhang Xiaohua's body had recovered. There were often many disciples who came to his small house to express their concern. It couldn't be said that these disciples were not sincere. They didn't really want Zhang Xiaohua to recover quickly. However, when Zhang Xiaohua saw their slightly exaggerated expressions and charming smiles, his heart was extremely uncomfortable. If one wanted to stand out, one should rely on one's own strength. If one only climbed up the thigh of others, it would not be one's own, and it would not be up to them. Others just shook their legs, and you would fall down. This was not the right way. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua quickly cupped his hands and said, "Many thanks for your kind intentions, senior brothers. Little brother's injuries have been controlled. I will slowly recuperate. Senior brothers, please do your own things." Chapter 708. When the disciples heard this, their expressions changed slightly. They said, "Io, if Junior Brother hadn't mentioned it, I would have almost forgotten about it. There's still ginger soup simmering on the fire. Don't let it dry up. I'll take my leave first." That's right. After hearing Junior Brother's words, I just remembered that this recover pill seems to be a pill from the Dawn Temple. Did I take the wrong one? If I let Junior Brother take it, wouldn't it be a big problem? I'll go back and see if there's any other pills like the Yuandan pill. Yes, my stomach hurts a little. I might have eaten something bad just now. It didn't take long for them to all leave. At this time, Lu Chaoxian came out from not far away with a smile. He said, "Junior Brother Run, what did I tell you that Headmaster Chen was coming?" Zhang Xiaohua was baffled. He looked at the sky and the ground. He said, "When did I say that you said that?" "Ha ha!" Lu Chaoxian laughed. "Who knows?" However, the smile on his face faded. He said seriously, "Actually, these Junior Brothers are also pitiful people. They just want you to protect them. If Junior Brother has the power, don't let them down. You can't always be alone on Tianmu Peak. If you don't have a few brothers to support you, you won't be able to achieve anything." Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose and looked at Lu Chaoxian. He said, "I didn't expect Senior Brother Lu to have the potential to be a doghead military advisor." Then, he copied Lu Chaoxian and said seriously, "If it was at Yuan Dusk, I could protect them. It's just for a few days. Moreover, it's a matter of life and death. But if I protect them now, It's not a matter of a few days. I've always been free and undisciplined. I'm used to being free and unfettered. How can I care so much? Since you don't have such thoughts, don't let others think about it. It's pointless to let Headmaster Chun and Wu Dalong worry. Lu Chaoxian was silent when he heard this. He really hoped that Zhang Xiaohua would be able to stand up and become the next head like the other disciples. Given Zhang Xiaohua's kind heart, he would definitely treat the Tianmu Peak disciples well. As for himself, based on his friendship with Zhang Xiaohua, which was different from others, his life would definitely be smooth sailing in the future, and his status would rise along with the tide. Unfortunately, everyone had their own ambitions. Zhang Xiaohua only gave a simple explanation, but Lu Chaoxian knew that Zhang Xiaohua did not care about Tianmu Peak's position. He could only smile and say, Junior Apprentice Brother Run has great ambitions, but it's a pity that the other Junior Apprentice Brothers don't know about it. Sooner or later, they will come and make a fuss. Zhang Xiaohua giggled. This is really too simple. I stayed here previously because my injuries were more serious. I needed Senior Brother Lu and the rest to take care of me. Although my injuries have not fully recovered, they're much more stable now. Senior Brother also knows that internal injuries need to be carefully nursed. There must be a secluded environment. Although this place is good, it is also very lively. I would like to ask Senior Brother to report to Headmaster Chun that I will move back to the top of Tianmu Peak today. I am used to the cave there. It is a good place to recuperate. Junior Brother Bai Huan has not returned. Others will not know what you are doing on the mountain alone. Lu Chaoxian was shocked and dissuaded her. If Bai Huan comes back, it will be like seeing a ghost in broad daylight. Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, but her words were firm. Lu Chaoxian was helpless. After saying a few words, he turned to ask Qin Feng for instructions. Zhang Xiaohua wandered around the empty space a few times. No one had been keeping an eye on the pavilion in the distance for several days. Zhang Xiaohua guessed that the news of Vice Hall Master Su's death had reached the ears of Wuzhou Ruins and the others, so there was no need for these eyes and ears to exist. Not long after, Lu Chaoxian turned back and smiled. Headmaster Chun is busy. At first, he did not agree for you to return to the peak. Later on, he nodded and said that I should accompany you. What do you think? Zhang Xiaohua was delighted. That's good. In the past, Senior Brother Bai took care of most of the medicine farm work on Tianmu Peak. I was worried about how I could handle it alone. Now that Senior Brother Lu is there, I am so lazy. Ha! Lu Chaoxian laughed and patted her shoulder. Bai Huan wants to be lazy. What he can do, your Senior Brother Lu can do even more. After he finished speaking, he went in to help Zhang Xiaohua pack her things. Zhang Xiaohua had always been meditating. She did not even unpack her bedding. After Lu Chaoxian entered the hut, he came out empty-handed. He shrugged. Junior Brother, you are very simple. I wonder if the bedding on the peak is still there? It is. Tianmu Peak is not a good place. I wonder if Headmaster Chen still sent people there. Who would take away my bedding? You don't say. Headmaster Chen really forgot that there's no one on duty on the peak. The pile of work is still left for Junior Brother Rin. Ah, Zhang Xiaohua laughed. Let's go. Let's go up the mountain to work. After she finished speaking, she walked out and headed straight for the peak. Lu Chaoxian smiled and followed behind her. Heaven Eye Peak was no different from usual. In just a few days, Zhang Xiaohua's ascension and descent had changed everything. In the hut on the peak, Bai Huan's belongings were still placed in an orderly manner. Their owner was no longer around. Zhang Xiaohua stood on the peak and looked around. She sighed in her heart. Then, she returned to the cave and reminded Lu Chaoxian not to disturb her if there was nothing urgent. After placing a restriction on the cave, Zhang Xiaohua escaped into the elixir chamber. Everything was no different from before. Zhang Xiaohua took a deep breath. It was as if there was only free breathing in the heaven and earth here. Sitting cross-legged in the elixir chamber, Zhang Xiaohua was not in a hurry to cultivate. Instead, she immersed her divine sense in her belt, intending to take out all the jade boxes. However, after looking at them and looking at the size of the elixir chamber, she dispelled this idea. Zhang Xiaohua was the biggest winner in this Valley Orchid Dusk refinement. Not to mention the black and white fruit that was like a yin-yang fish, not to mention the golden lotus fire seed, not to mention the 10,000 years stalactite milk. Even the herbs that the Pill Tower Hall disciples brought back and the herbs that the Misty Hall disciples picked were extremely considerable. How could the elixir chamber hold them all? After tidying up the jade boxes and other items, Zhang Xiaohua was happy, but also a little sad. From Lu Chaoxian's mouth, she already knew that in this Valley Orchid Dusk refinement, other than the female inner sect disciples who did not suffer much loss, all the other halls were completely annihilated. Even Wu Ming, a dignified outer sect disciple, almost died. Thinking of the nearly 500 lives of the Pill Tower Hall, wouldn't the entire fragrance cult have lost thousands of lives in the Valley Orchid? But immediately, Zhang Xiaohua thought of the tragic death of Black Lightning. Needless to say, this was definitely the doing of the lingering Fragrance Peak's consecrators or elders. They did escape, but angered Yellow Wind and caused a beast tide, burying thousands of disciples in the stomachs of the beasts. Every drink and every peck, perhaps it is fate. Every cause and effect must be borne by someone. The Tao of life and death, the Tao of karma, is nothing more than this. A merciful heart filled Zhang Xiaohua's heart. His heart moved, and he immediately sat down cross-legged. He did not even take out the primordial stones. His eyes focused on his nose focused on his heart, and his mind directly welcomed the starry sky of the heavenly Tao in his heart. After an unknown amount of time, Zhang Xiaohua woke up from his meditation. He only felt that the previously unfathomable heavenly Tao seemed to have become much clearer. A kind of intimacy hit him in the face, as if the countless resplendent stars in the sky were like the stones he played with when he was young, clearly and incomparably intimate. Zhang Xiaohua's heart moved and secretly said, "Could it be that the comprehension of the heavenly Tao is the same as the cultivation of a mental cultivation method, and there are many realms?" Before he had time to ponder, his heart moved, and he escaped from the alchemy room. Just as he appeared in the cave, he heard an anxious call from the outer sect. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. Listening to the voice, it was Lu Chaoxian. This senior brother Lu had always respected him. If it was not an urgent matter, he would definitely not disturb his cultivation. Could it be the matter of Bai Yefeng? Zhang Xiaohua's heart moved, but when he released his divine sense, there was only Lu Chaoxian outside the cave. Strange, could it be another trap for me to jump into? Zhang Xiaohua unconsciously began to feel suspicious. Zhang Xiaohua came out of the cave, looked up at the sun, and said with a smile, "Senior brother Lu, you came back quite quickly." Chapter 709. Reward? When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he looked at Lu Chaoxian, who was still trying to hold back his laughter. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and secretly said, "Big brother, you have to make it clear. I almost ran away just now. This is really not a joke." Immediately, he piled a smile on his face and said, "What reward? Does senior brother Lu know?" "I don't know about this." Lu Chaoxian shook his head and said, "In the past, it was just herbs and elixirs, and only a cart was dragged here. This time, it is a little different, and junior brother Ren's contribution is quite big, so it is even more impossible to guess." But then, he said mysteriously, "I heard from the disciple who went up the mountain that the person who came was junior brother Ren's old friend, so there should be a generous reward." "Old friend?" Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood and said with a smile, "Junior Uncle Yang is here? It seems that he is really looking forward to it." "What reward can there be?" Zhang Xiaohua said that he was looking forward to it, but in his heart, he was disdainful. Even if it was elixirs, even if it was spiritual grass, or even a bestowed cultivation method, he didn't care about it. But when Zhang Xiaohua saw Yang Yao, he was shocked by the reward that Yang Yao mentioned. "What?" Zhang Xiaohua couldn't believe his ears. "Sending me to Shixin Peak? The peak where Ethereal Hall is located?" When he saw Zhang Xiaohua's strange expression, Yang Yao felt extremely guilty as he said, "Dear nephew, there's no need to be anxious. I know that the Shirsheen Peak is extremely dangerous. The dozen or so disciples from our pill expanding hall were bullied quite badly, and a few of them even had their legs broken. However, as he said this, he picked up a small package from a small table next to him and handed it to Zhang Xiaohua. He said with a smile, "It's just that our Dan-spreading hall really doesn't have any disciples with high martial arts skills to go. Well, Master Chun and Wu Dalong naturally can go, but they're the elites of the hall and have a lot of things to deal with. We can't let them go to Shirsheen Peak to play such a small role. Nephew, you've just come to the Pill Sprouting Hall. You should experience life at Shirsheen Peak and accumulate some experience. It should be beneficial for your future development. Moreover, the Hall Master has said that when you complete your task and return to the Pill Sprouting Hall, you will be given a suitable position. Oh, this is Nephew's other rewards for refining Yuan Twilight. They are the Yuandan Pill, Spirit Congealing Pill, and other pills used by Lingxiang Peak." Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua's face became more and more interesting, and she waved her hand again and again. "Martial Uncle Yang, you really think too highly of Nephew." No, the Hall Master really thinks too highly of this disciple. What kind of people are the Ethereal Hall? They are all fierce and fiendish. Many of the previous disciples were not able to do it, let alone me. I have little talent and knowledge, and am not good at the affairs of Pill Expanding Hall. When I go to Shirsheen Peak, it will inevitably delay the affairs of the hall. Martial Uncle Yang, please go back and let Hall Master think about it, and find someone better." Yang Yao smiled and said, "Nephew, you must be joking. How can Hall Master's order be changed just like that? Moreover, Nephew managed to escape from the Yulon Grand Canyon, and even saved Lu Chaoxian and the others. Even in the First Faith Peak, your martial arts are considered to be one of the best. Moreover, Nephew is also saved by a disciple of the First Faith Peak, and can be considered to have some relationship with the First Faith Peak. This task can only be assigned to you." I can't go. Zhang Xiaohua still shook her head. After thinking for a moment, Yang Yao took out a small bag from his arms and opened it. Inside were 2 tokens. He picked up one of them and said, "Nephew, Hall Master has already thought of your excuse. This is the Hall Master's token of our Pill Expanding Hall. If you take it, it means that Hall Master has personally come. If you encounter any danger on Shirsheen Peak, take it out. Maybe it can help you." Zhang Xiaohua reached out and took it, carefully looking at it, and said, "Do the disciples of Shirsheen Peak give face to our Pill Expanding Hall? Is this token as useful as Martial Uncle Yang said?" Yang Yao looked at Chen Fengxiao and Wu Zhouxiu, who were accompanying her, and chuckled. "Nephew, you are wrong. Do you think this token is useful on Shirsheen Peak, or Baiwei Peak, Tianmu Peak, or Three Reeds Peak?" Zhang Xiaohua was slightly taken aback. Looking at Chen Fengxiao and Wu Zhouxiu's jealous eyes, she instantly understood. This token was said to be for her use on Shirsheen Peak, but in fact, it was for her use in Pill Expanding Hall. In other words, it was another reward for her, a reward for using someone else's power. As long as she took this token, wouldn't she be able to do whatever she wanted in the entire Pill Expanding Hall? Zhang Xiaohua giggled and looked at the other token. It was much smaller than the one in Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Seeing this, Yang Yao smiled and said, "This is also a token of our Pill Expanding Hall. With this token, you can go to Heaven and Earth Hall, Cleansing Jade Hall, Weapon Refining Hall, and other places to ask for a weapon, jade artifact, or other things. Consider it a form of compensation for your trip to Shirsheen Peak." Then he stuffed the token into Zhang Xiaohua's hand and said in a low voice, "Nephew, you are really lucky. This old man thought that you had died in the stomach of a beast and was rather sad for a few days. I didn't expect to see you today. Valley Master Nya is really lucky." Valley Master Nya? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. What did this have to do with Rejuvenation Valley? "Senior brother has a good horse here. I'll give it to you as a memento." Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. "That's great." Chun Feng laughed and rolled his eyes. "I also wanted to say this, but you beat me to it." Wu Zhouxiu cupped his hands. Little brother is still a member of your grass division. It's different from our pill division. Let me do this favor." Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua walked out of the courtyard and went straight to the peak to pack up. Outside the hall, Lu Chaoxian had heard it long ago. His expression was half happy and half worried. He was happy that this little brother who had gone through life and death with him was favored by Hall Master. He would definitely have a meteoric rise in the future. Even he would be able to benefit from it. But he was worried that Shixin Peak was definitely not a good place. His junior brother was still young. Zhang Xiaohua accompanied Zhang Xiaohua to the peak. Along the way, Lu Chaoxian said a lot of things to pay attention to. He must have heard it from other people. Zhang Xiaohua found it funny. She was going home. How could there be such risks? She was also touched. After all, they had gone through life and death together. Some things were really different. She nodded in agreement to let Lu Chaoxian be at ease. When Zhang Xiaohua entered the cave, Lu Chaoxian hurriedly ran down the mountain. The disciples of Tianmu Peak still didn't know about Zhang Xiaohua's situation. It was fine if others didn't send them off. But senior brother Wang and the other disciples were saved by Zhang Xiaohua had to be sent off. Chapter 710. Looking at the disciples' changing face, Zhang Xiaohua educated him again. "Besides, I have already made an appointment with you. Are you waiting for me to start? If I were to sneak attack you, what would you call it just now?" "You." The disciple was speechless. He waved his hand and said, "Brothers of the Misty Hall, the little medicine boy of the pill expanding hall from the fragrant school is bullying people in our Shixin Peak. This is unbearable. We can't let him bully us." Then he said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Come on, little medicine boy. Let this young master see what you are capable of." After that, he turned to the disciples and said, "Go. Let the pill-expanding schools see our misty halls." Hearing this, the disciples at the side were all eager to give it a try. They held their long swords and were about to rush forward. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua leaped down from his horse. Without waiting for the disciple to finish his words, he rushed in front of him and waved his left hand. Slap, slap, slap. He gave the disciple 2 tight slaps on the face. Then, he grabbed the disciple's neck as if he was holding a chick. Looking at the disciple's face gradually turning red and his eyes bulging, Zhang Xiaohua said disdainfully, "I used to hear the senior brothers talk about the Misty School and the deeds of the Misty School's disciples. So, I have always looked forward to the disciples of the Misty School. I thought they were the real men of the Jianghu. Similarly, I also thought that the disciples of the Misty Hall were heroes. But now, it seems that they are nothing more than this. You are unworthy of the name Misty. Look at what you have become now, using hidden weapons to attack an unknown disciple from the dark. You don't care if the disciple knows martial arts or not. When a sneak attack failed, you still want to bet. When you lose the bet, you want to gang up on the disciple. What kind of behavior is this? This is the lowly behavior of the Jianghu. A decent man of the Jianghu would never do this. Do you think that with what you have done today, you are worthy of the name Misty? Are you worthy of the seniors of the Misty School who defended the name Misty?" Then she sighed and said, Forget it, forget it. The Misty Hall is nothing more than this." After saying that, she shook her hand, and the disciple was easily thrown to the ground. He could only gasp for breath and couldn't get up for a long time. This group of young disciples, when they were 12 or 13 years old, had encountered the great change in the Misty School. Before they could break out with the other disciples, they were captured by the Righteous Alliance and the other 2 sections. During that time, they had seen many of their senior brothers being murdered. They had long regarded the disciples of the incense cult, the Righteous Alliance, and the Dalan Temple as their enemies. Even now, in the incense cult, their hearts were still restless. As long as they had the chance, they would take the disciples of the other halls who were on duty at the Shixin Peak to give them trouble. They didn't care if the disciples knew martial arts or not. After a long time, they had already gotten used to it. Now that Zhang Xiaohua had said those words, their faces changed. It was unknown whether it was because they were ashamed or because they were shocked by Zhang Xiaohua's strength. Most of their eyes flickered and didn't dare to look at Zhang Xiaohua. There were also a few who were eager to fight, but no one dared to make the first move. In a hurry, They didn't dare to step forward. Seeing the reaction of the disciples, Zhang Xiaohua secretly nodded. She couldn't expect all the disciples to be reasonable. Most of them could listen to unpleasant words. The Misty Hall was still the Misty School of the past. The disciple that Zhang Xiaohua had thrown to the ground blushed. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's tall, thin figure and somewhat childish face, he gritted his teeth, walked up to Zhang Xiaohua, turned over, and knelt down. How could Zhang Xiaohua let him kneel down? She immediately pulled him back and smiled. Senior brother, what do you want? It's not a festive occasion. I don't have any copper coins to give. The disciple struggled hard, but couldn't move an inch. He was even more surprised and smiled bitterly. I am Lu Qiaogang of the Misty Hall. Junior brother, you are right. Let's not talk about the hidden weapon just now. Since I have lost the bet just now, I have to kowtow. This? Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. She was just casually talking about her disappointment with the disciples of the Misty Hall. She didn't think that it would enlighten them. If this disciple really kowtowed to her, if they knew her identity, then wouldn't she? After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, the bet is a bet. Logically speaking, you should kneel down to me. However, a man should not kneel down. I think you just casually said the conditions of the bet and fell into my trap. I'm also in the wrong. If you feel that you are in the wrong today, then return to the Misty Hall and kowtow to the seniors in your hall. It was Lu Qiaogang's turn to hesitate. When it came to kneeling down, he was also hot-blooded and wanted to kneel down. Now that he was slightly sober, he knew that if he kneeled down, it would make him look noble. However, it would also make him lose face. He had lost a lot of face. When he returned to the hall, people would talk about the reason. Those who knew would say that he was in the wrong and kept his promise. But what about those who didn't know? They would definitely say that he was a coward. Sigh. Lu Qiaogang sighed. It's hard to be a true hero. Then, he borrowed the ladder and came down. He cupped his hands and said, Senior Ren, you are magnanimous. You are the role model of my generation. Thank you for your guidance today. Seeing that this senior brother was disrespectful to Zhang Xiaohua, Lu Qiaogang was afraid that Zhang Xiaohua would attack him in anger. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua with some apprehension. He saw that Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, It doesn't matter. It is important to welcome the inner disciples. I will wait here. While they were talking, the horn sounded loudly on the mountain peak, and then several tall horses came down the mountain. Senior fellow apprentice Ding did not dare to delay and said, Forget it, junior fellow apprentice Lu. Come with me. You don't have to wait anymore. Deputy Hall Master Zhong and Deputy Hall Master Qin have also come down the mountain. We'd better hurry to the front to welcome the inner disciples. After that, the group of disciples left Zhang Xiaohua's side and rode down the mountain. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the dust and could not help but smile bitterly. She wanted to ask about the news of her second brother, but it seemed that she should forget it. She would see him a while. Whether he was good or bad, she would know. While she was thinking, the people from the mountain had already approached. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly pulled the big black horse and Huan, who liked to walk in the middle of the road, aside. Several big horses galloped on the road. Suddenly, a woman's exclamation came from the horse near Zhang Xiaohua. Hey! When Zhang Xiaohua looked, it was a woman in black sitting on the horse. Her eyes were fixed on her, and there was a trace of surprise in her eyes. Chapter 711. Hearing Yang Ruping's question, the masked Chun smiled and said, Hall Master Yang's doubts have already been considered by Lord Sect Leader. This Zhang Xiaohu has only cultivated the ethereal divine art 4 to 5 years and is only at the entry level. Even if he cultivates for another 30 to 50 years, it is impossible for him to reach the peak. However, if he cultivates the Suhuan mental cultivation method, and with the help of the Suhuan pill, he can definitely reach the next level in a short period of time. It is even possible for him to reach the peak of the Suhuan mental cultivation method within 20 years. But Yang Ruping still wanted to continue, but she was stopped by the masked Chun. Chun said coldly, Hall Master Yang, I respect you as my senior sister, so I have always answered your questions. But don't you think it's disrespectful to His Excellency when you keep questioning me when I'm passing on the decree of His Excellency? If it was anyone else, this envoy would have already taken him down. Thus, I ask all Master Yang to sit down quietly. It won't be too late to continue speaking after the sect leader's decree is passed on. Yang Rupiying's face darkened, and she lowered her head and returned to her seat. Seeing that when Hai was about to stand up, the masked Chun Chun immediately said, "Hero Zhang Xiao, you should also sit down. This is merely a gift from Lord Sect Leader to Zhang Xiao. There is no need to implicate too many people. It is better for him to choose what is more important and what is less important." After speaking, she handed the brocade box to Chun Chun. Chun Chun quickly looked at Zhang Xiao. What choice did Zhang Xiao have? In his heart, he was just a cripple. What ethereal divine art, what Suwon mental cultivation method, they had nothing to do with him. Since it was a gift from Lord Sect Leader, it was fine for him to take it. Perhaps he could leave it for Chang'e to use in the future. Thus, he didn't need to think too much and nodded slightly. Very good. The masked Chun Chun smiled and casually handed the brocade box to Chun Chun. She then turned around and sat back in her seat. Then, he looked at Yang Rupiying and said with a smile, "Hall Master Yang, this envoy has completed the 3 tasks ordered by Sir Religion Master. If Hall Master Yang has any questions, you can ask them now." Then, he changed the topic and said, "However, before we came, Lord Sect Leader had already instructed us that the foundation of Zhang Xiaohu's misty divine art is very shallow. Moreover, it conflicts with the Su Huan Heart Sutra, so we might as well dissolve the inner strength that he had cultivated in the past." This, Yang Rupiying and Wen Hai were both shocked. However, Chun Chun waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, I've already checked his meridians just now. There's no internal energy in his meridians. Only some of the cinnabar fruit's medicinal effects are still there. This saved me a lot of effort." Then he cast a sideways glance at Zhong Pei and said, "This might be a good deed done by some people. However, now it has helped Zhang Xiao. He can directly cultivate the Suhuan heart technique." Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu was greatly shocked. That day, Zhao Jian's palm had indeed hit his dantian. Zhao Jian had even checked it. Why did the envoy of lingering fragrance peak not notice it now? However, if Zhao Jian's palm had no effect, where did his decades of internal energy go? At this time, he heard the masked Chun Chun say, "In addition, Sir Religion Master knows that Zhang Xiaohu is a direct disciple of the original Misty School. Considering that the cultivation method of the Misty School is not bad, he also agreed that Zhang Xiaohu can cultivate the Misty Divine Art in addition to cultivating the Suhuan Heart Technique." Although these words were dignified, the meaning was clear. That was, Zhang Xiaohu must first cultivate the Suhuan Heart Technique before he can cultivate the Misty Divine Art, as long as he is not afraid of Qigong deviation. Alas, Yang Rupiying and Wen Hai both sighed in their hearts. The situation was stronger than the person. Since they were under the roof of the fragrance cult, it was impossible for them to not listen to Sir Religion Master's orders. They could only cup their hands and say, "Thank you, Sir Religion Master, for your kindness." Good. The masked Chun Chun clapped his hands and said, "Since everyone is very happy, this envoy's trip can be considered to have ended satisfactorily." Then he glanced at Zhang Xiaohua, who was sitting at the end of the table, and said to Yang Rupiying, "Master Yang, Ren Xiaoyao of the Pill Opening Hall was saved by Zhang Xiaohu of the Misty Hall, and he also helped Xia Zai of the Misty Hall to set her bones. Now he has come to the Misty Hall to be a disciple on duty. It is estimated that there will be a long time in the future. I hope you won't be too harsh on him for his sake." This kind of thing was really insignificant to Yang Rupiying. Moreover, the Misty Hall had changed a lot at this time, so how could she care about this? She naturally nodded and said yes. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua hurried forward to greet Yang Rupiying and Aunt Qin again and thank Chun Chun. At this time, the masked Chun Chun said to him, "Chun Chun, come here." Chun Chun was puzzled. He looked at Chang'e and walked to the masked Chun Chun. The masked Chun Chun carefully looked up and down for a while and said with a smile, what a lovely child. You almost died under the trap of Zhao Jian." After that, he took out a jade pendant and threw it to Chun Chun. Chun Chun caught it and heard the masked Chun Chun say with a smile, "Well, I know you now. Chun Chun, if you're bullied in the fragrance cult in the future, you can tell them my name. I guarantee that no one will dare to take advantage of you." Chun Chun was stunned and turned to look at Chang'e. Seeing Chang'e nod, he said softly, "I just don't know. Sister's name is this sister was really forced." It was even more awkward than Zhang Xiaohua that day. The masked Chun Chun seemed to have guessed the answer to the riddle and was in a very good mood. He laughed and said, "Although it's not easy for others to remember my sister's name, it's really easy for you to remember." Zhang Xiaohua, who knew the details, couldn't help but secretly curl her lips and sneer. Chun Chun said softly, then, "Sister, please tell me." Chun Chun. The masked Chun Chun said, "Yes, Lord Messenger, please tell me." Chun Chun. The masked Chun Chun still said. Chun Chun was a little embarrassed and said, "Yes, Chun Chun is here. Lord Messenger, please tell me." The masked Chun Chun suppressed the smile in his heart and said, "Chun Chun." Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but chuckle and whisper, "Junior Sister Chun, the messenger of Fragrance Peak, is also called Chun Chun." Chun Chun exclaimed and revealed many small canine teeth. The masked Chun Chun smiled and took her hand, saying, "Chun Chun, in the future, you will be protected by Chun Chun in the fragrance cult." Chun Chun was also happy and bowed. "Thank you, Sister Chun Chun." "Ha ha." The masked Chun Chun turned to Yang Rupiying and said with a smile, "Well, I have finished my mission and there are many things to do in the Misty Hall. I won't disturb Master Yang." Yang Rupiying tried to persuade Chun Chun to stay, but failed, so she led the disciples to send Chun Chun to Fragrance Peak. Zhang Xiaohua, as the representative of the Pill Expanding Hall, was also lucky to be there. When they were about to say goodbye, Chun Chun called Zhang Xiaohua to the front and asked in a low voice, "Ren Xiaoyao, let me ask you, are there any secret marks on your body?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked confusedly, "I don't think so. What's wrong?" Chun Chun smiled mysteriously and said, "You have held my hand and got married. Have you been touched all over your body? If you have any thoughts, it's better to check your entire body first. If there are any hidden marks that you don't know about, it's better to get rid of them as soon as possible. Don't wait for others to come knocking on your door. You'll be at a loss." Zhang Xiaohua fell off the horse with a plop. Chun Chun laughed and went down Shishing Peak. It was already late at night. In a small courtyard near the cliff of Shishing Peak, a tall and thin figure was standing in the middle of the courtyard. He stood with his hands behind his back and silently watched everything in the night. This person was the disciple on duty of the Pill Expanding Hall, Zhang Xiaohua. Chun Chun came to Shishing Peak to deal with the matter of Zhang Xiao. It only took him half a day to bring Zhong Pei back to Lingxiang Peak, put him to death, and gave Zhang Xiao a reward. After Chun Chun left, Aunt Qin ordered the disciples to make a good arrangement for Zhang Xiaohua. Because of Chun Chun's instructions to Yang Rupiying and seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was familiar with Chun Chun, the disciples of the Misty Hall did not dare to neglect. However, the residence of the disciples on duty of the Pill Expanding Hall was far from the Misty Hall. It was impossible for the Misty Hall to move the Pill Expanding Hall close to the Misty Hall just for Zhang Xiaohua. Therefore, when she saw the apologetic expression of the disciples of the Misty Hall, Zhang Xiaohua felt gratified for a while. After the disciples of the Misty Hall left, Zhang Xiaohua led his big black horse and David's deer into the courtyard. After a few days of living together, Huan had somewhat adapted to the aura of Little Black and Little Yellow. She could occasionally get close to them. At this time, when Zhang Xiaohua led her, she did not feel nervous. This was a very tidy little courtyard. There were 2 entrances and 2 exits, and there were a few small rooms. Zhang Xiaohua looked around carefully, and there was nothing that was out of the ordinary. Hence, he randomly picked one of the rooms to be his room, and threw some of his belongings inside. Normally, he should be looking around the courtyard at this time, but first, it was late at night. Second, Zhang Xiaohu was seriously injured. When he heard from Chun Shun that the internal force in his meridians was completely gone, Zhang Xiaohua was worried. Therefore, he stood in the courtyard and thought about whether he should go and see his second brother. After thinking for a while and looking at the sky, Zhang Xiaohua made an incantation and went underground. He went straight to the Misty Hall during the day. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua came to the Misty Hall. At this time, the Misty Hall was still brightly lit. Many things had happened during the day, and Yang Rupiying and the others were probably still discussing what to do after Zhongpei left. Zhang Xiaohua sneaked into the Misty Hall and showed himself in an inconspicuous corner. At this time, the candles in the Misty Hall were flickering. Zhang Xiaohua did not find Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Qin Shun. There were only Yang Rupiying and Aunt Qin. Zhang Xiaohua looked around and wanted to escape, but he heard Yang Rupiying say, "Deputy Hall Master Qin, today in the Misty Hall, Zhang Xiaohu's behavior was a little strange." I think, when he said this, he stopped. Aunt Qin asked, "Hall Master Yang, if you have something to say, please say it." Deputy Hall Master Qin, don't you think that Zhang Xiaohu didn't refuse at all and directly accepted the Sutra of Yuan Heart? Did he want to accept sect leaders' goodwill and let the Misty School? Please vote monthly. Please vote for recommendation. Please collect. Please tip. Thank you. Chapter 712. Zhang Xiaohua entered the alchemy room, looked around, and put the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace into his belt. Even the jade boxes that were piled up in the alchemy room were swept clean. Previously, he didn't have much space to store them in his money pouch, but now that he had a belt, he naturally had to take them with him. Thinking that there were still some jade boxes left in the small courtyard on the mountainside, Zhang Xiaohua didn't plan to tidy them up. The extremely precious medicinal herbs had already been brought to the mountaintop by him, and most of the remaining ones had been taken by him. The rest were just ordinary goods, and compared to what he had obtained in the Yulon Grand Canyon, it was just a drop in the ocean. Moreover, those jade boxes were known to all the disciples of Tianmu Peak. If he took them away, wouldn't it raise suspicions? When the alchemy room was empty, Zhang Xiaohua took out his bag from his money pouch and slung it over his shoulder. Finally, his gaze fell on the great wisdom sword that was inserted into the ground. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua slightly gritted his teeth and released his divine sense, trying to put it into his money pouch. However, the great wisdom heavy sword was like a boulder in the wind. It could not be moved by the divine sense at all, let alone put it into the money pouch. Zhang Xiaohua was very curious and thought to himself, "What material is this heavy sword made of? Even my divine sense can't move it." Immediately, he tried to use the object controlling technique. When the technique hit the sword, it was like a dragonfly trying to shake a stone pillar. It didn't move at all. Zhang Xiaohua was delighted. The more peculiar this sword was, the more precious it was. But immediately he frowned. Huan wasn't here, and ordinary horses couldn't carry it. He also had to follow Yang Yao to Shixin Peak. It seemed that he couldn't take the great wisdom sword away for the time being. However, it didn't matter. Other than Zhang Xiaohua, there might not be anyone in Chuanxiang cult who could pick it up, not to mention putting it in the alchemy room. Even if he left it halfway up the mountain, it would still be safe. After looking around and seeing that there was nothing else, Zhang Xiaohua formed a hand seal and left the cave. She followed the path down the mountain. Halfway through, they saw Lu Chaoxian, Senior Wang, and the others walking up to them. They couldn't help but exchange some words when they saw each other. Under Lu Chaoxian's urging, they accompanied Zhang Xiaohua to the courtyard. At this time, Yang Yao, Chen Fengxiao, and Wu Zhouxu were talking in the yard. A handsome big black horse was tied to one side. When they saw Zhang Xiaohua come in, they all went forward to welcome her. What Wu Zhouxu saw was the package slung over her shoulder. Wu Zhouxu's eyes twitched for no reason, and there was a bitter taste in his mouth. He muttered in his heart, "Where did she hide the package?" He actually made me search for several days without any results. Sigh, fortunately, something happened to Vice Hall Master Su otherwise. That's right, if Vice Hall Master Su was still around, Wu Zhoushu would have to follow Vice Hall Master Su's orders and go against Zhang Xiaohua. Wouldn't that put him in a difficult position? Sending Zhang Xiaohua off was simple. Since Yang Yao was in a hurry, all they did was send Zhang Xiaohua to the courtyard. After exchanging a few words of farewell, the two of them mounted their horses, shook the reins, and went down the mountain. After passing a bend, Zhang Xiaohua pulled the reins and turned the horse around. She took a closer look at the towering Tianmu Peak. It had only been a few months since she entered the incense cult and left Tianmu Peak. So many things had happened. Some of these things might have become stories that were passed down by word of mouth among the disciples of Tianmu Peak. However, most of them had become eternal secrets that no one knew about. The mountain remained the same, but the people had changed. Perhaps this was the sorrow of being a human. Zhang Xiaohua then turned the horse around and chased after Yang Yao. She left Tianmu Peak, the people of Tianmu Peak, and the matters of Tianmu Peak behind her. After descending Tianmu Peak, Yang Yao led Zhang Xiaohua in the direction of Baiyu Peak. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Martial Uncle Yang wants me to go to the Pill Expanding Hall by myself? She quickly caught up and asked, Martial Uncle Yang, this road seems to lead to the Pill Expanding Hall. I heard from the senior brothers of Tianmu Peak that Shixin Peak should be in another direction. Yang Yao smiled. Nephew, you should know that this old man is bringing you along a remote path. Remote path? Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. From Yulon Grand Canyon to Tianmu Peak, they had taken a remote path which made it difficult for her meridians to recover. Why was it still a remote path from Tianmu Peak to Shixin Peak? Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's surprise, Yang Yao explained, Nephew entered the sect late and did not know this. Although the 19 peaks of Tianmu Peak are connected by roads, most of the disciples feel that the road is too far. Most of the time, they take a shortcut and take a small path. As more and more people take this path, the road becomes more and more obvious. Therefore, if it is not a formal occasion, many people will take some unknown paths to save a lot of time. This time, Nephew should have asked someone to send you to Shixin Peak. After all, this is your first time there, but the situation on Baiyu Peak. Oh, everyone is very busy, so this old man volunteered to send you there. I still have other things to do, so I can only take this shortcut and not waste time. Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands. Thank you, Martial Uncle Yang, for your concern. Haha. Yang Yao was very happy. It's no matter. You can be considered as someone I personally brought into Tianmu Peak. Your progress is also my pride. That year, Lu Lihong. I heard that this time, Martial Nephew Lu finally obtained the opportunity to refine Yulon Grand Canyon. But then he encountered the Beast Tide. His luck and martial arts are wasted. Yang Yao sighed several times, feeling pity for Lu Lihong. Zhang Xiaohua's face was full of disdain. Although his martial arts are good, his heart is sinister. That kind of martial arts will only harm others. It is better not to have such a person. Seeing Yang Yao speak as if he was speaking the truth, Zhang Xiaohua's heart was half relieved. However, Yang Yao was also good to her. Zhang Xiaohua did not suspect him, but she could not prevent others from using Yang Yao. It was not impossible to set up an ambush in such a remote place. However, would Zhang Xiaohua care about such a trivial ambush? Do I care about your ambush? The answer was naturally no. Zhang Xiaohua's divine ability did not need to be mentioned. Even the internal injuries that could not be healed for a long time had completely healed today. The recovery of her injuries was beyond Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. It was only when she came down from Tianmu Peak that she realized it. After 2 days and 2 nights of comprehending the heavenly Tao, not only did her cultivation of the Heart Sutra improve, even the injuries that she had deliberately delayed had healed without leaving any traces. However, Zhang Xiaohua did not know whether it was because of her cultivation of the Heart Sutra or because of her comprehension of the heavenly Tao. Raising her guard, Zhang Xiaohua followed Yang Yao along the desolate path for half a day. When it was almost sunset, Yang Yao turned his horse around and headed in another direction. Looking at the faint traces of small path on the ground, Zhang Xiaohua stroked her chin and followed without hesitation. However, after half a meal's time, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She pulled on the reins and stopped the horse. Yang Yao, who was in front of her, also stopped. He asked puzzledly, "What's wrong?" "Virtuous nephew run. Are you tired?" Following which, he slapped his forehead and said, "Look at me. I forgot that you are still injured. I have been running for half a day without stopping the horse. I believe you can't hold on any longer." Yang Yao raised his head and looked around. He pointed to a gentle slope in front and said, "Let's go. We have set up our tents on that slope. We will rest there today. Ha! Not to mention you, even my old bones are aching." As he spoke, he shook the reins and slowly moved forward. Zhang Xiaohua still stood there without moving. Looking at Yang Yao's back, she seemed to be deep in thought. After thinking for a while, she raised her head and let out a low whistle. That whistle wasn't loud, but it was abnormally clear. Her voice wasn't very loud and could only be heard in the wilderness. Hearing Zhang Xiaohua's whistle, Yang Yao was also surprised. He stopped the horse and turned to look at Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua ignored him and leaped onto the horse's back. He stood there steadily and looked around, causing Yang Yao to feel rather puzzled. Just when Yang Yao was puzzled, in the distance to the left, there was a hurried, rustling sound from the grass and trees, following which there were a few low neighs that sounded like the neighing of a horse. Looking over, there was a wild beast that looked like a donkey and a horse that wasn't a horse. Wasn't it Zhang Xiaohua's lost mount, David's deer? Zhang Xiaohua stood on the horse's back and unconsciously felt tears in her eyes. Huan had been with her for so long. Although she didn't usually use it and felt that it didn't matter if she had it or not, it would still eat grass around her. When she really couldn't see it, her heart immediately felt empty. Especially when she was tidying up the great wisdom sword, she missed this ugly mount even more. Zhang Xiaohua didn't expect to actually meet it here. At that time, her heart was moved. She thought that there would be an ambush from the Pill Tower Hall ahead. When Huan ran closer, Zhang Xiaohua jumped off the horse's back. Huan immediately intimately came forward and stuck out its tongue to lick Zhang Xiaohua's face. But just as it came close, its sensitive nose sniffed as if it felt a huge threat. It raised its head and neighed, then immediately retreated, as if Zhang Xiaohua was a familiar stranger. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua was also stunned. She immediately realized that there were two little monsters in her arms. Ordinary horses might not be able to smell it, but how could a somewhat intelligent beast like Huan not know? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and patted her chest. She used her hand to beckon Huan to come over. Her expression was like a wet nurse who was about to breastfeed. However, Huan was like a child who had made a mistake. Its big eyes flickered with fear as it vigorously shook its head. When Zhang Xiaohua took 2 steps forward, it took 2 steps back. When Zhang Xiaohua stood still, it also stood still, but it didn't dare to take another step forward. After trying a few times, Zhang Xiaohua was quite helpless. It must be said that the mother of the 2 little things in her arms was the Beast King who commanded the Yulon Grand Canyon. How could a spirit beast like Huan, who had never seen the world, dare to approach? Yang Yao looked at the side and also said with heartache, "AI, look at this 4 odd beasts. I don't know what those disciples did a few days ago. They didn't even let a beast go." Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. Chapter 713. In the end, Huan did not dare to get within 3 feet of Zhang Xiaohua. However, Zhang Xiaohua was very happy to see Huan. Therefore, Huan followed behind the big black horse and went up the gentle slope. After helping Yang Yao pack up, Zhang Xiaohua quietly stuffed Little Black and Little Yellow into her bag. Then, she walked over to Huan, who had been pacing back and forth beside her. The 4 odd beasts, who had gained human intelligence, looked at Zhang Xiaohua with their eyes. They looked like children who wanted to go home and admit their mistakes, but couldn't find an excuse to do so. When it saw Zhang Xiaohua walking towards it, Huan Huan took a step back as usual. However, it immediately raised its bald head and ran towards her as if it was cheering. It stuck out its tongue and licked Zhang Xiaohua's face. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and stretched out her hand to cover her face. Huan Huan was very happy. Its soft tongue licked Zhang Xiaohua's hand. It was ticklish but very comfortable. After a moment of intimacy, Zhang Xiaohua patted Huan Huan's head. She looked around and saw that there were many whip marks on Huan Huan's body. However, they were almost healed. Other than that, there were not many changes. It was even fatter than when it was on Tianmu Peak. Only its fur was glossy. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "This guy is really a glutton." His days here seemed to be more comfortable than when he was on Tianmu Peak. Not long after, the sun set in the west, and night came as usual. Zhang Xiaohua waited for Yang Yao to fall asleep. She immediately sealed his acupoints and set up a restriction around him. After casting a spell, she stood up and rushed towards Tianmu Peak. When she saw the odd beast Huan Huan, Zhang Xiaohua knew that her great wisdom sword did not have to be locked up in the boudoir anymore. When Zhang Xiaohua rose into the air, she realized that her wind-riding technique had improved. When she flew in the wind, she seemed to be able to blend in with her surroundings. Her speed was much faster, and the consumption of her genuine qi was much lower. Is this the result of comprehending the way of heaven again? Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat enlightened. Previously, whenever he had time, he would try to comprehend the way of heaven, but it didn't help him in his cultivation. Now, it seemed that the comprehension of the way of heaven was a slow process that produced fine work. It was just a small improvement, but it actually had so many reactions in his cultivation. It seemed that the comprehension of the way of heaven should be a main homework for his future cultivation. In the time it took for 2 meals, Zhang Xiaohua had flown to Heaven Eye Peak. He did not delay and directly entered the pill room. He took the great wisdom sword and was about to return. However, when he was halfway up the mountain, he remembered the small courtyard where he kept the jade box. Even though Chun Feng had smilingly promised to keep these medicinal herbs properly, and that Zhang Xiaohua could come back to collect them in the future, he would be gone for many years. Who would have the patience to come and collect them? Who knows, someone might benefit from it. Hence, Zhang Xiaohua identified the direction and headed towards the small courtyard. Sigh, it was still the mentality of a small farmer. He didn't want to let others take advantage of him at all. The interior of the small courtyard was the same as before. Even the jade box in the room was the same as before. No one had moved it. It seemed that no one was interested in these medicinal herbs. Zhang Xiaohua did not need to light a lamp. He only released his divine sense and picked up the jade box with the medicinal herbs. With a pinch of an incantation, he kept it in his belt. The incantation of the Way of Immortals was very strange. He finished it in the time it took to smoke a cigarette. Seeing that there were still many empty jade boxes, Zhang Xiaohua unconsciously clapped his hands. He thought maliciously, "After half a year, this Xiao Xiao will return. In front of Chun Feng, I will open these empty jade boxes. I want to see what kind of expression Head Master Chen will have. Hee, maybe I can even get him to compensate me with some rare medicinal herbs." Just as he was thinking, he suddenly heard light footsteps outside the courtyard. Other than me, who else would be interested in these medicinal herbs? However, the footsteps stopped outside the wall. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand what was going on. He made a hand seal and teleported to the other side of the wall. He listened carefully and heard a familiar voice. "Senior brother, why did you ask me to come here? Is it something important again?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He thought, "This seems to be some spy I met on Tianmu Peak." As expected, another voice that Zhang Xiaohua was familiar with rang out. "Sigh, I don't want to either. It's just that I received orders from Elder Qingming. There are some things that I need to hand over to Junior Marshal Brother Qian." Qingming? Junior Marshal Brother Qian was obviously stunned. He blurted out, "Isn't Elder Spring Equinox the only leader? Why is there another Qingming? He can't be a fake, right? How is that possible?" Senior Marshal Brother, who was full of disdain. He explained, "Ever since Lord Spring Equinox got into trouble, I have been worried that others might find out. In the end, one night, I was woken up by someone. When I saw that I was in the forest, I don't even know how I got there. Lord Qingming's cut and token are exactly the same as Lord Spring Equinox's. I think other than our own people, no one else would know about it. Then what orders does Lord Qingming have? Yes, because Lord Spring Equinox's matter has attracted the attention of Lingering Fragrance Peak. Lord Qingming wants us to stop contacting each other frequently. We should lay low for now. After another half a day, they suddenly heard a shout from the side of the road. Stop! Which disciple are you? You can't come to the Shishine Peak so easily. Chapter 714. Zhang Xiaohua was not surprised to see someone blocking the way. She had heard from Bai Huan that there were many experts from the fragrance cult guarding the foot of the Shishine Peak. They forbade the disciples of other halls to enter and the disciples of the Misty Hall to go down the mountain. Sure enough, Yang Yao stopped the horse and dismounted. He took out a token and a yellow silk and handed them over. He smiled and said to the disciple, I'm Yang Yao of the Pill Sprouting Hall. I'm here to send my disciple Ran Xiaoyao to the Shishine Peak. He's the new disciple on duty of the Pill Sprouting Hall. Oh. The disciple took the token and silk and looked at them carefully. He turned his head and looked at Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua quickly dismounted and walked to the front. The disciple pointed to the David's deer behind him and asked, What's this? Zhang Xiaohua smiled apologetically and said, This is my old mount. I'm used to it, so I brought it here. The disciple waved his hand and said, Come here. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled and walked to the front. The disciple suddenly reached out and patted on Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. Zhang Xiaohua was even more puzzled. However, there was not much internal strength in the disciple's palm, so she could not hurt him. She ignored him and let him pat her shoulder. The disciple was surprised to see Zhang Xiaohua standing there straight and did not even sway. He looked back at Yang Yao and said, This disciple is a little interesting. I remember that guy 3 months ago was slapped to the ground by me. He seemed to have stayed in the Shishine Peak for a few days before the disciples of the Misty Hall found fault with him and broke his arm. I didn't expect that your pill-sprouting hall could find such a good seedling, but Yang Yao smiled apologetically and said, Yes, aren't all halls worried about this matter now? We just sent our disciples to be on duty, but the Misty Hall thought that they were going to plant a spy. They were all malicious. What can our hall master say about this matter? Our disciples are just messing around. We can't be too serious about it. It's not easy to find a disciple who can handle the situation. How can it be so simple? The disciple shook his head and said, Shishine Peak is in a mess now. Several groups of disciples went to Lingxiang Peak. It's hard to say if your disciple went there. Alas, it's a pity. The continuous pity made Zhang Xiaohua curious. She cupped her hands and said, Senior, are the disciples of the Misty Hall so violent? Anyone who goes, there will be broken arms and legs are broken? But Yang Yao asked curiously, What? They had fought all the way to Lingering Fragrance Peak? What's the matter? That disciple looked at Yang Yao snappily. How could you, and I know about the incident at Lingering Fragrance Peak? Yang Yao was embarrassed. He smiled and said no more. The disciple turned to Zhang Xiaohua and said, You will know when you get there. However, I would like to give you a piece of advice. Being able to tolerate what others can't is the way to survive in the Misty Hall. Even if others challenge you to a duel, don't force yourself. You should know that although the Misty Hall has declined, there might still be a few unknown disciples waiting to deal with you. What does this have to do with me? Zhang Xiaohua said in her heart. This Xiaoxia is the direct disciple of Zhang Xiaohu, who could do anything to me. However, she still cupped her hands and thanked this enthusiastic disciple. The disciple smiled and said, Go there. I hope you will behave yourself. Otherwise, you will be thrown off Shishine Peak in a few days. Then, he casually handed the 2 tokens to Zhang Xiaohua and said to Yang Yao, Senior brother, I think you should return. You can only let this junior brother on duty pass. Okay. Yang Yao heard and hesitated for a moment. Then he thanked Zhang Xiaohua and said, I have told you everything along the way. This place is far from the Pill Repository Hall, and there are no close disciples here. Everything depends on you. And this disciple is right. Although your martial arts are strong, you are still lacking compared to the disciples of the Misty Hall. Don't try to be brave, and just follow the Hall Master's orders. Zhang Xiaohua's heart warmed when she saw Yang Yao acting like an old woman. She smiled and said, I know, Martial Uncle Yang. Come and pick me up in a few years. Okay, Yang Yao patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder and said, let's part here. I have other important matters to attend to in the Pill Repository Hall. If you have the chance to go back to White Mountain Peak, come and see this old man. After he finished speaking, he mounted his horse and rode away. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the enthusiastic old man and cupped her hands to the disciple on duty. Then, she mounted her horse and left for Shixin Peak. Shixin Peak was different from Tianmu Peak. The scenery was exceptionally beautiful, not to mention the green pines and cypresses, the flowing mountain springs, even the chirping of birds was intoxicating. Moreover, the yuan qi of heaven and earth on Shixin Peak seemed to be stronger than on Tianmu Peak. Looking at the many medicinal fields at the foot of the mountain, it was easy to tell how many medicinal herbs were planted on Shixin Peak. But looking at the ordinary herbs in the fields, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh. That's right. These herbs are like weeds on Tianmu Peak. No wonder second brother insisted on bringing the 4 carts of herbs back. While she was thinking, Zhang Xiaohua went up the mountain path. Just as she was about to urge her horse to go up, she heard a soft sound in the air. A hidden weapon was aimed at her shoulder. Zhang Xiaohua had already seen clearly with her spiritual awareness that the hidden weapon was an iron lotus seed. She frowned and thought, how can the disciples of the Misty School treat people like this? It's different from what I imagined. Zhang Xiaohua was born in Huanxi Villa, which was a branch of the Misty School. She had always been looking forward to joining the Misty School. She had only been in and out of the Misty School for a few times, but she felt that the whole sect was full of vitality. Every disciple would have a smile on their face and would greet people politely. The unhappiness in the pharmacy hall and the embarrassing things that happened to Zhang Xiaohu were all forgotten by her consciously or unconsciously. Even by Huan's description, Yang Yao's advice and the disciple on duty at the foot of the mountain were not taken seriously by Zhang Xiaohua. They obviously regarded her as a member of the Misty School and thought that they were exaggerating. She even felt a little conflicted. But now, she saw the disciple of the Misty School shoot out the hidden weapon without saying a word. If it were an ordinary disciple of the Pill Hall, wouldn't his shoulder be injured? It seemed that the disciple at the foot of the mountain was not lying. The disciple of the Pill Hall, who had his hands and feet broken, must be true. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua was a little angry. What was the difference between him and the bullies in Lu Town if he bullied the weak with his martial arts? She wanted to make him suffer a little. But on the one hand, this was the Misty School. Maybe he was the junior fellow apprentice of her second brother. On the other hand, if she fought with him as soon as she arrived, wouldn't the senior fellow apprentice at the foot of the mountain be wasting his breath? So, Zhang Xiaohua's expression remained unchanged. She waved her right index finger and middle finger in front of her eyes and casually pinched the iron lotus seed between her fingers. Then she looked up at the tree next to her and said with a smile, I wonder which senior fellow apprentice of the Misty School wants to make fun of me. There was a cry of surprise from the tree next to her. Then several young disciples who were about the same age as Zhang Xiaohua jumped down. The one in the front was holding a sword in his right hand and something in his left hand. He walked forward and looked up and down. Then he looked at the 4 odd beasts behind Zhang Xiaohua. He did not salute and said loudly, Who are you? Why did you barge into my Shixin Peak? Your Shixin Peak. Zhang Xiaohua heard and laughed. I am Ren Xiaoyao, a disciple of the Pill Hall's Shixin Peak. I haven't asked for your name yet. What are you laughing at? The disciple was a little angry. You are just a little apprentice of the Pill Hall. What is there to be proud of? I have seen a lot of people like you. Many of them have died in my hands. You seem to have some skills. Give me a reason. Otherwise, today will be the day you leave the mountain. Zhang Xiaohua curled her lips and sighed her heart. Where's the magnanimity of a senior from a Misty school? But she said, the 19 peaks of the incense cult naturally belong to the disciples of the incense cult. This Shirsheen peak used to belong to my pill hall, but now it has been allocated to your Misty hall. When did it become your Misty halls? How can I not laugh at your words? The disciple was furious. Zhang Xiaohua's words could not be refuted. So he waved his sword and shouted, "You brat, don't pretend to have a glib tongue. Don't think that you are good at catching the hidden weapon. I didn't use my full strength. If you have the guts, jump down from your horse and fight with me for 300 rounds." Zhang Xiaohua was a little angry when she heard the disciple calling her me. She smiled and said, "There is no need for 300 rounds. I want to knock your sword down in 30 rounds." The disciple was even angrier and shouted, "That's good." Chapter 7:15. Looking at the disciple's changing face, Zhang Xiaohua educated him again. "Besides, I have already made an appointment with you. Are you waiting for me to start? If I were to sneak attack, what would you call it just now?" "You." The disciple was speechless. He waved his hand and said, "Fellow brothers of the Misty Hall, the little medicine boy of the pill expanding hall from the fragrant school is bullying people in our Shirsheen Peak. This is unbearable. We can't let him bully us." Then he said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Come on, little medicine boy. Let this young master see what you are capable of." After that, he turned to the disciples and said, "Go, let the pill-expanding school see our Misty halls." Hearing this, the disciples at the side were all eager to give it a try. They held their long swords and were about to rush forward. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua leaped down from his horse. Without waiting for the disciple to finish his words, he rushed in front of him and waved his left hand. Slap, slap, slap. He gave the disciple 2 tight slaps on the face. Then, he grabbed the disciple's neck as if he was holding a chick. Looking at the disciple's face gradually turning red and his eyes bulging, Zhang Xiaohua said disdainfully, "I have heard the senior brothers in the hall talk about the Misty School and the deeds of the Misty School's disciples. So, I have always looked forward to the disciples of the Misty School. I think they are the real men of the Jianghu. Similarly, I also thought that the disciples of the Misty Hall are heroes. But now, it seems that they're nothing more than this. You are unworthy of the name Misty. Look at what you have become now, using hidden weapons to attack an unknown disciple from the dark. You don't care if the disciple knows martial arts or not. You want to bet with him when you fail. You want to gang up on him when you lose the bet. What kind of behavior is this? It is the lowly behavior of the Jianghu. A decent man of the Jianghu would never do this. Do you think that with what you have done today, you are worthy of the name Misty? Are you worthy of the seniors of the Misty School who defended the name Misty?" Then she sighed and said, Forget it, forget it. The Misty Hall is nothing more than this." She shook her hand, and the disciple was easily thrown to the ground. He could only gasp for breath and couldn't get up for a long time. This group of young disciples, when they were 12 or 13 years old, had encountered the great change in the Misty School. They didn't have time to break out with the other disciples and were captured by the Righteous Alliance and the other 2 factions. During this time, they had seen many of their senior brothers being killed. They had long regarded the disciples of the 3 factions as their enemies. Even now, in the Misty School, their hearts were still restless. Whenever they had the chance, they would take the disciples of the other factions who were on duty at Shirsheen Peak. They didn't care if these disciples knew martial arts or not. After a long time, they had already gotten used to it. How could they still care about the morals of the Jianghu and basic etiquette? Now that Zhang Xiaohua had said those words, their expressions changed. It was unknown whether it was because they felt ashamed or because they were shocked by Zhang Xiaohua's strength. Most of their eyes flickered, not daring to meet Zhang Xiaohua's gaze. There were also a few who held their swords, eager to fight. However, no one dared to make the first move. In a moment of urgency, they didn't dare to step forward. Seeing the reaction of the disciples, Zhang Xiaohua secretly nodded. She couldn't expect all the disciples to be reasonable. Most of them could listen to unpleasant words. The Misty Hall was still the Misty School of the past. The disciple who was thrown to the ground by Zhang Xiaohua was even more embarrassed. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's tall and thin figure and somewhat childish face, he gritted his teeth and went forward to kneel down. How could Zhang Xiaohua let him kneel down? She immediately pulled him back and smiled. Senior brother, what do you want to do? It's not a festive occasion. I don't have any copper coins to give. The disciple struggled hard, but couldn't move an inch. He was even more surprised. He smiled bitterly and said, I am Lu Qiaogang of the Misty Hall. This junior brother's teaching is very right. Let's not talk about the previous hidden weapon. Since I have lost the bet, I have to kowtow. This. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. She was just casually talking about her disappointment towards the disciples of the Misty Hall. She didn't expect that it would enlighten them. If this disciple really kowtowed to her, if they knew her identity, then wouldn't she? After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, the bet is a bet. Logically speaking, you should kneel to me. However, a man should not kneel down. I think you just casually said the conditions of the bet and fell into my trap. I'm also in the wrong. If you feel that you are in the wrong today, then return to the Misty Hall and kowtow to the seniors in your hall. It was Lu Qiaogang's turn to hesitate. When it came to kneeling, his blood had rushed to his head and he wanted to kneel. Now that he was slightly sober, he knew that if he kneeled, it would make him look noble. However, it would also make him lose face. It would be a huge loss of face. When he returned to the hall, people would talk about the reason. Those who knew would say that he was in the wrong and kept his promise. But what about those who didn't know? They would definitely say that he was a coward. Sigh. Lu Qiaogang sighed. It is difficult to be a true hero. Then he borrowed the ladder and came down. He cupped his hands and said, Senior Ren, you are magnanimous. You are the role model of my generation. Thank you for your guidance today. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, You are too kind. In the future, I will have to live with the support of the disciples of the Misty Hall. We will understand and support each other. At this moment, Lu Qiaogang thought of the reason why Zhang Xiaohua came to Shixin Peak. He smiled and said, Senior Ren, please wait for a moment. After he finished speaking, he took out a signal and prepared to report to Shixin Peak. When the disciples saw that the two of them had turned hostility into friendship, they were happy. A few of them came over and greeted Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua returned their greetings and said a few words. Then she asked, By the way, I heard that there is a disciple called Zhang Xiaohu in your hall. How is he doing now? Zhang Xiaohu? When the disciples heard this name, their expressions changed greatly, and their expressions became strange. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she couldn't help but wonder, is there no such disciple? Or did something happen to Zhang Xiaohu? A disciple blinked and asked curiously, Senior Ren, how do you know Senior Zhang's name? Zhang Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, This one also participated in the Yulan Dusk refinement. It was your hall's senior brother, Zhang Xiaohu, who rescued this one from the Yulan Grand Canyon. You are the disciple of the pill expanding hall that Senior Zhang rescued? A few disciples said in disbelief, Senior Ren's martial arts seems to be higher than Senior Zhang's. How could he be rescued by him? I was seriously injured at that time. If not for Senior Zhang's help, I would have been buried in the stomach of a beast. Then, she asked, Is Senior Zhang in Shixin Peak now? What happened? The disciples hesitated and said, Senior Zhang is indeed in Shixin Peak, but after a long time, they couldn't say anything. Zhang Xiaohua was anxious and was about to urge them. At this time, Lu Qiaogang had already set up the signal. He waved his hand, and a whistling arrow flew into the air. Then, he said with a smile, Senior Ren, wait a moment. There will be a senior brother coming to pick you up. Zhang Xiaohua didn't care who came to pick him up. She just asked, What happened to Senior Zhang? Lu Qiaogang smiled bitterly. I can't tell you, but Senior Zhang's situation is not good. And I also heard from others. I didn't see it myself. Zhang Xiaohua's heart thumped. She was about to ask when she saw a colorful signal flying from the direction that Zhang Xiaohua came from. It was similar to the signal of the inner disciples that Zhang Xiaohua saw in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Lu Qiaogang was shocked and shouted, "The signal of an inner disciple? Could it be that an inner disciple came to Shixin Peak to ask about the Yulon Grand Canyon? Quickly go down the mountain to pick him up. I'll—" Before the voice fell, there was a rush of horse hooves from the mountain road. Everyone looked up and saw several horses galloping down from Shixin Peak. The first one was a 25 or 26 years old disciple. When he came close, he saw Zhang Xiaohua and frowned. He turned his head and asked, "Junior brother Lu, why did you send the signal of our sect?" Lu Qiaogang stepped forward and said, "Senior brother Ding, this senior brother is the disciple on duty sent by the Pill Expanding Hall of Baiyue Peak. I'll inform the senior brothers on the mountain to find someone to pick him up." And senior brother Ding was obviously surprised. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua with an unfriendly look and said, "How can I have time to pick him up? Didn't you see that the inner disciples are all at the foot of the mountain? You just have to look at him here." At this moment, the hall masters must be ready to welcome the inner disciples and have no time to pay attention to him. Anyway, he just has to go up the mountain. When the inner disciples come up the mountain, let him follow them. Seeing that this senior brother was disrespectful to Zhang Xiaohua, Lu Qiaogang was afraid that Zhang Xiaohua would get angry and attack him. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua with some apprehension. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, "It doesn't matter. It's important to welcome the inner disciples. I'll wait here." While they were talking, the horn sounded loudly on the mountain peak, and then several tall horses came down the mountain. Senior fellow apprentice Ding did not dare to delay and said, "Forget it, junior fellow apprentice Lu. Come with me. You don't have to wait anymore. Deputy Hall Master Zhong and Deputy Hall Master Qin have also come down the mountain. Let's hurry to the front to welcome the inner disciples." After that, the group of disciples left Zhang Xiaohua aside and rode down the mountain. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the dust and could not help but smile bitterly. She wanted to ask someone about second brother, but it seemed that she should forget it. She would see him in a while. Whether he was good or bad, she would know. While she was thinking, the people from the mountain had already approached. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly pulled the big black horse and Huan, who liked to walk in the middle of the road, aside. Several big horses galloped on the road. Suddenly, a woman's exclamation came from the left hand of the horse that was very close to Zhang Xiaohua. "Hey!" When Zhang Xiaohua looked, it was a woman in black sitting on the horse. Her eyes were fixed on her, and there was a trace of surprise in her eyes. Chapter 716. Zhang Xiaohua was also taken aback, following which, he was overjoyed. There was no need to look at this woman's face. Just by looking at her waist, which was as thick as a bucket, and that extremely pleasant voice, he knew that this was an old friend of Misty's sect, Aunt Qin. Zhang Xiaohua then realized that Lu Qiaogang had mentioned Deputy Hall Leader Qin from the Misty Hall. She must be the former Hall Leader Qin from the Misty School's Mingtsue Hall. However, when she heard Aunt Qin's, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know if she was surprised because she had heard about her from Chang'e and saw her here, or because she was surprised to see a similar face from a few years ago in the Chuanxiang cult. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know if she should greet her. While she was hesitating, Aunt Qin also withdrew her gaze and brushed past the other people. The other people also looked at Zhang Xiaohua strangely, but didn't stop to ask. After that, the entire mountain path returned to its usual tranquility, and no one came over. Zhang Xiaohua had to pull the big black horse and the four odd beasts to the side of the mountain path obediently, waiting for the inner core disciples of the Lingxiang Peak to go together. After the time it took to eat a meal, the sound of galloping horses could be heard from the foot of the mountain. Looking up, it was the group of young disciples who had been with Lu Qiao. They rode past in a hurry, not even sparing Zhang Xiaohua a glance. "In such a hurry," Zhang Xiaohua shrugged. "I thought it was the inner core disciples who came up." After a while, there was another sound of horse hooves. This time, it was still a few young disciples who came over, but also hurriedly left. Zhang Xiaohua was a little disdainful. "Why is that? Why don't they go up together?" Can't they save money by going up separately? However, after a while, Lu Qiaogang and the others appeared again, which made Zhang Xiaohua dumbfounded. Even if he was ignorant, he seemed to know that this was definitely not as simple as saving money. This seemed to be a kind of etiquette, right? Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was still in a daze, Lu Qiaogang shouted, "Senior apprentice brother, run. After the inner sanctum messengers are over, you can just follow behind the carriages." After he finished speaking, he spurred his horse and left. Zhang Xiaohua opened her mouth and swallowed the words she wanted to ask. Then, several groups of disciples walked past Zhang Xiaohua. Only then did she see the inner court emissary walking slowly from the foot of the mountain. This was a simple caravan. At the front, there were a few young disciples riding pure white horses. At the back, there were a few female disciples with their faces covered. They also looked quite young. In the middle, there was a girl in green clothes. She was wearing a veil, so her face could not be seen. She rode a large red horse, like a moon surrounded by stars. Behind the girl, there was an exquisite carriage that slowly followed behind the caravan. Currently, Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense could only reach 10 feet and could not see through that disciple's veil. Of course, what kind of person was our Zhang Xiaohua? She was a magnanimous man, so how could she do such a thing without telling? Cough, cough. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua carefully hid at the side of the road and waited for the caravan to pass. In this caravan, on both sides of the inner court emissary, there were Misty Hall's Deputy Hall Master Qin and Deputy Hall Master Zhong accompanying them. They were pointing at the side of the mountain path and talking about something. When Aunt Qin saw Zhang Xiaohua in front, she unconsciously looked at her a few times and secretly said, "This person looks very familiar. Why can't I remember? It seems that other than the Misty School's disciples, I don't know anyone else in the fragrant religion. Could she be one of the Misty School's disciples? That can't be right. This young person is only in her teens. Back then, she was even younger. How could she be one of the Misty School's disciples? Back then, could it be? I remember now. She looks very similar to Zhang Xiaohu's younger brother. She should be called Zhang Xiaohua. What a pity, that child." While Aunt Qin's imagination was running wild, the inner court emissary in green also saw Zhang Xiaohua and unconsciously blurted out, "Ren Xiaoyao." From her tone, there was a hint of joy. Hearing this, Aunt Qin smiled apologetically and said, "Emissary Chun, do you see someone you know?" Yes. Deputy Hall Master Qin. Don't you see the young disciple in front of us? He's a little medicine boy from the Pill Hall and entered the fragrant religion a few months ago. After saying this, she shut her mouth. It was better not to tell the Misty Hall about the fragrant religion. Moreover, she was an inner court emissary. How could she answer every question? Hearing this, Aunt Qin didn't mind and smiled. Should I call him over? The woman in green thought for a while and nodded. I'll have to trouble Deputy Hall Master Qin to ask him what he's doing at Shixin Peak. Aunt Qin nodded and urged her horse forward, stopping in front of Zhang Xiaohua. Seeing Aunt Qin coming over, Zhang Xiaohua was very happy. When she was about to salute, she heard Aunt Qin say, "Are you Ren Xiaoyao, a disciple of the Pill Hall?" Zhang Xiaohua was startled and smiled apologetically. "Yes, I am. May I know, you're a disciple of the Pill Hall. Why are you here at Shixin Peak? What's the matter?" Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua knew that Aunt Qin didn't recognize her, so she took out the token of the Pill Hall and gave it to Aunt Qin. She briefly explained the whole story. Hearing this, Aunt Qin nodded and carefully looked at the token. Then she put the silk in her arms and returned the token to Zhang Xiaohua, saying, "Please wait a moment." She was about to turn around when she turned back and asked, "Do you know Lord Chun of the Inner Court?" "Lord Chun?" Then she realized that it was the gossipy Chun Chun. She nodded and said, "I've met him a few times, including Lord Kong." Aunt Qin thought for a while and got up to greet the approaching carriages. Then she reported the matter to Chin Chun. Chin Chun smiled and said, "That's good. Let him come over and we can go up the mountain together." Hearing this, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong hurriedly stopped her and said, "Lord Chun, the disciple on duty of the Pill Hall, is just an ordinary disciple. It's always the ordinary disciples of the Misty Hall who welcome him. If he goes with Lord Chun, won't he? Chun was wearing a veil, so no one could see the change of expression on her face. She snorted and said, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong, do you still want to meddle in my affairs? Even if I let him ride my horse, it's none of your business. Zhong Pei blushed and smiled apologetically. I just think it's a little inappropriate. It'll damage the identity of the inner court disciple of the Lingxiang Peak. Inner court disciple? Chun chuckled and said, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong is now the Deputy Hall Chief of the Misty Hall. Let's talk about the identity of inner court disciple in the future. Hearing this, Aunt Qin felt happy and bowed. She said, Then should I call Run Xiaoyao over? Chun waved her hand and motioned her to hurry up, but she didn't say anything else. Zhang Xiaohua was not surprised to hear that Chun called her. Chun was a gossipy girl. It would be strange if she didn't call her over when she saw her and asked her to tell her what happened in the pill hall. So Zhang Xiaohua pretended that she didn't know and walked to Chun's horse in a panic. She bowed to the ground and asked, I'm Ren Xiaoyao of the pill hall. Greetings to the inner court emissary. May I know why you call me here? Hearing this, Chun was amused and said in a low voice, I just heard from Deputy Hall Chief Qin of the Misty Hall that you're the disciple on duty of the pill hall this time. So I call you here and go up the mountain with me. Hearing that Chun used a fake voice, Zhang Xiaohua had already complained to her heart. As I said, Chun is not a quiet person. She won't stop until she does something strange. Zhang Xiaohua looked panicked and waved her hand quickly. I don't dare. I'm just a little pharmacist of the pill hall. How can I be qualified to walk beside you? Chun laughed in her heart and said in a slightly hoarse voice, Don't talk nonsense. Just come here. Believe it or not, I'll ask Elder Purple Herb to whip you 30 times. Zhang Xiaohua shrank her neck and looked scared. She jumped on the black horse next to her and walked behind Chun's horse. Chun looked around and frowned. She whispered, Well, Deputy Hall Chief Zhong, can you walk behind me? Ask the pharmacist of the pill hall to come here. I want to ask about the pill hall. Well, seeing that Chun suddenly changed her voice, Zhong Pei felt very strange. Hearing her words, he was even more puzzled. What's there to ask about the pill hall? Don't you want to ask about the Misty Hall? His Excellency asked me to care more about the lives of ordinary disciples and give them more care. Isn't that right? Do you want to question the wise decision of His Excellency? Zhong Pei was sweating. He quickly reined in the horse and walked behind Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua walked to Chun with a bitter face and bowed. What can I do for you? Ahem. Chun coughed and pretended to say, Tell me what you've done in the pill hall in the past few months. Zhang Xiaohua had already burst into laughter. Tell me what you've done in the pill hall in the past few months? It was obvious that Chun knew that she had just come to the fragrance cult a few months ago. She knew that the messenger Chun in front of her should be the original Lord Chun. Zhang Xiaohua had ears. How could she not hear the messenger Chun mentioned by Deputy Hall Chief Zhong? However, Chun thought that he had concealed it well. His fake voice was, ahem, as real as a real one. Putting aside the fact that Chun somewhat looked down on ordinary disciples, Zhang Xiaohua was still pleasing to the eye in other aspects. At this time, he had found his second brother and no longer had to suck up to Chun, but he was also willing to tell Messenger Chun about the interesting things of the pill expanding hall. So, Zhang Xiaohua rode beside Chun and told him about what had happened in the pill hall and the gambling on Timu Peak. Chun was so fascinated that he almost wanted to fight on behalf of Zhang Xiaohua. He unconsciously revealed his original voice and complained, Ren Xiaoyao, why do you have all the good things? You've held the hand of the beautiful girl in the Rejuvenation Valley and got engaged. Even in the fragrance cult, you can meet such interesting things. God, what can I say about you? You could be an inner disciple, and I'll go to the pill hall. You? Zhang Xiaohua pretended to be surprised and almost fell off the horse. She pointed at Chun's veil and said, Who are you? Chapter 717. Chun Shin accidentally revealed his true face and was regretting it. However, when he saw Zhang Xiaohua almost falling off the horse, he couldn't help but feel happy. After lying for a long time, wasn't this a happy moment? Chun Shin was so happy that he swayed back and forth and laughed heartily. There was no trace of the majesty of the inner disciple just now. Not only Aunt Qin and Zhong Pei, but even the few inner sect disciples accompanying them had faces full of astonishment. After Qin Shun finished laughing, he sat up straight again and coughed twice. His voice was as calm as usual as he said, "Well, Rin Xiaoyao, you're very good. Your martial arts are good, and you get along well with the disciples of the Pill Toppling Hall. You could be considered an excellent talent. If there's a chance in the future, I'll put in a good word for you in front of the sect master." As soon as he said that, everyone around him was filled with admiration. Zhong Pei was even more jealous. What kind of relationship was this? Just fooling a few burly men from Tianmu Peak and exchanging a few stalks of herbs for their pills. And that was it? Then what have they done all these years? Wasn't it better than what they had done in the past few days? Was this the legendary? Having connections in the court makes it easier to be an official. Zhang Xiaohua looked surprised and repeatedly cupped her hands at Qin Shun. She said, "So it's Shun? Lord, I was wondering which inner disciple was so approachable and amiable as usual, making me feel like bathing in the spring breeze. Since it's Lord Shun, it's really not strange. Oh, by the way, Lord Kong, Lord Xia, how are they?" Qin Shin beamed with joy. Good, very good. It's just that you can't go to Lingxiang Peak. Otherwise, I'll take you to see them." Aunt Qin, Zhong Pei, and the other disciples' jaws dropped to the ground. This inconspicuous little medicine boy of the Pill Toppling Hall even knew Peacock and Xia Qing. Could this guy be a relative of the sect master? Then Chun Shun felt a little strange and asked, "But according to what you said, you went to Tianmu Peak as soon as you arrived at the Pill Toppling Hall. You didn't even see Elder Z Shan. How could he know you? And he even let you be a disciple on duty at Shishine Peak?" Then he looked at Aunt Qin and smiled. The Misty Hall is famous for its unity. The disciples on duty in the other halls have suffered a lot in their hands. Your martial arts might be good, but you've only been in the fragrant cult for a few months. You don't know anything. How can you succeed? Zhang Xiaohua pondered for a moment. It was not a secret that she had participated in the Yulan Dusk refinement. That day at the exit of the Yulan Grand Canyon, Chun Shin only cared about running away and did not see her. Otherwise, he would not be here listening to her. She just had to talk about the unimportant things. Thus, he cleared his throat and said, "About this, it is because this little one participated in the Orchid Evening refinement and accumulated a little merit. Twilight Orchid refinement." Qin Shin was shocked and pointed at Zhang Xiaohua. You also participated? Why didn't I see you? And you actually made it out alive." Then she realized, "Are you the disciple of the Tudin Hall, saved by the disciple of the Misty Hall?" Zhang Xiaohua touched her nose and said with a wry smile, replying to Lord Shun, "It is this little one." This little one relied on Senior Zhang Xiaohu of the Misty Hall to escape from the Yulan Grand Canyon. Zhong Pei's face was extremely ugly, and he wanted to say something, but stopped. Chun Shin's interest was piqued, and she quickly said, "Quick, tell me about it." Zhong Pei quickly stepped forward and said, "Reporting to Envoy Chun, it's getting late. Let's hurry up. Hall Master Yang is still waiting for Envoy Chun on the mountain." Chun Shin echoed unwillingly, but then she felt strange and said, "But that yellow wind was unusually brave. It was like the wind. How could you escape with your life?" Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua exerted his strength. His face suddenly turned pale, and he looked frightened. He said in a trembling voice, "Lord Chun, please don't mention it. Speaking of this, I'm just scared. What on earth was that thing that was like the wind? I still don't know. You don't know that when I ran in front, it chased after me. It disappeared for a while, and then appeared again. At first, my neck was cut by it. You see, after that, he was about to show his neck." Qin Shin couldn't look at his neck. He waved his hand and said, "Then what happened later?" "Later, I don't know what happened. That thing slowed down a little. But then I didn't know where I ran to. I saw a very deep cliff, and then I heard a cry that resounded through the sky. Then I felt a pain in the back of my head and fainted. I guess I was killed by that thing. Ah, Chen was also surprised. Knowing that Zhang Xiaohua was in front of him, he also shouted, "Why did the yellow wind come from the back of your head? Didn't it tear the throat?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "Lord Chun, I don't know. At that time, I didn't care about anything and tried my best to run to a place with many trees. I was afraid that thing would catch up with me. Now that I think about it, it was because I ran into the valley that the thing was afraid that someone would come out from the exit, so it hesitated. Or perhaps there was something wrong with that thing, so it slowed down the more it chased me. In the end, it knocked me out. Perhaps it thought that I was already dead." Chen was thoughtful, but Zhang Xiaohua was nervous. He didn't know if this lie could be deceived by Chen. After a long while, Chen asked again, "Ren Xiaoyao, can you tell me what happened after you met Zhang Xiaohu?" Zhong Pei, who was at the side, couldn't help but want to remind him. However, after patting his horse and taking 2 steps forward, he stopped. "Nonsense. You've repeatedly disturbed the inner court emissary's observation of the people's situation. Isn't it obvious that you have a guilty conscience?" Zhang Xiaohua was also stunned and secretly said, "What's there to say? Isn't it all a story made up with second brother and second sister-in-law? Could it be that the people of Lingxiang Peak saw something wrong?" After thinking for a while, he cleared his throat and told the story that he had discussed with Zhang Xiaohu one by one. Even the matter of saving the inner disciple was put on Zhang Xiaohu. Of course, in the middle of the story, Zhang Xiaohua did not forget to praise herself. "Lord Chun, the inner disciple's bones were all set by me. If there's any merit, don't forget me. I don't dare to share with senior brother Zhang Xiaohu. I'll just give a little reward." As he said, he stretched out his little finger and gestured the size of a fingertip. Chen laughed out loud and said, "If you didn't tell me, I really wouldn't know. When I have the chance, I'll definitely report this matter to the sect master." Then he asked, "Where did you learn the technique of setting bones?" Zhang Xiaohua was surprised and said, "Lord Chun, don't you know? I came from Rejuvenation Valley. The medical skills of Rejuvenation Valley are also famous in Jianghu." "Isn't that so?" Chen patted his forehead and said, "I really forgot about this." Then Zhang Xiaohua followed up with a casual look. "Lord Chen, why have you come to the ethereal hall today? Is it to reward senior brother Zhang for saving the inner disciple?" The corners of Chen's mouth under the veil curled up, and he said with a smile, "How can you know the whereabouts of the inner disciple?" Then he looked at the disciples of Shixin Peak who were already in sight and said with a smile, "Let's go. You're just in time. Follow me and you'll know." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry and secretly complained, "Isn't it just an inner disciple? What's so great about it? I, Xiaoxia, have been talking all the way and my mouth is dry. Can't I let you say a word? If it weren't for my second brother's reputation, I, Xiaoxia, would be too lazy to talk to you." Although he thought so, his mouth was tight and he said modestly, "I'll listen to Lord Chen's orders. In front of Lord Chen, I'm willing to lead the horse and serve you faithfully." Chen laughed again and said, "Forget it. I don't need you to do this. Just watch from the side." On Shixin Peak, Yang Rupiying and Hall Master Yang had been waiting anxiously for a long time. After several waves of disciples came up to report, there was no news, which made her very anxious. Although there would be no accidents on the mountain road of Shixin Peak, she was a little confused because she hadn't come up for a long time. Yang Rupiying was not relieved until she saw the figures of the crowd. But even so, Chen and others still went up the mountain slowly, which made her frown and her heart move for no reason. Is this a show of strength from His Excellency? I don't know which junior sister this messenger is. I only heard that her surname is Chen. I don't know if she is easy to get along with. Yang Rupiying bowed and said, "Chang'e and Chen are female disciples and have not been tortured to extort confession. It's okay to call them up, but Zhang Xiaohu, As she said, she looked at Zhong Pei. Zhong Pei hurriedly got up and said with a smile, "Messenger Chun, I took over this matter from the beginning. I know it's of great importance and concerns the lives of thousands of disciples in the sect, so I dare not be careless." However, Zhang Xiaohu refused to say anything, so I had to use some punishment. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, his mind buzzed again. He was furious in his heart. His eyes were round as he stared straight at Zhong Pei. This ignorant man, he actually dared to torture second brother. He must be tired of living. Chen Chen waved his hand and said, "It doesn't matter. Punishment is a necessary means. You just need to send Zhang Xiaohu to the front of the hall." Hearing that Chen Chen did not mean to blame him, Zhong Pei was overjoyed. He waved to the law enforcement disciples behind him and said, "Go and bring Zhang Xiaohu here." The law enforcement disciples behind him hesitated for a moment and bowed to take the order. Not long after, a stretcher carried Zhang Xiaohu, who was covered in blood and bruises and whose breathing was a little weak. Zhang Xiaohua, who was standing in the crowd, stared at the stretcher as soon as it appeared. Her eyes were faintly filled with tears. When she saw her second brother's miserable condition, she almost exploded. However, when her divine sense swept over Zhang Xiaohu, she found that her second brother was still alive and not in danger. Only then did she force herself to restrain herself and see what Chun Chun was looking for. At this time, Chang'e and the other Chen Chun were also brought to the front of the hall. As soon as Chang'e saw Zhang Xiaohu, he no longer cared about etiquette and rules. He rushed forward in a few steps and wanted to hug Zhang Xiaohu. However, he was covered with wounds and did not dare to do so for fear of hurting Zhang Xiaohu. He only held the bamboo pole of the stretcher tightly with his hands. His tears had already dripped onto Zhang Xiaohu's body. Chen Chen also hesitated for a moment before following behind Chang'e. Her tears fell as she cried, Senior brother, you can't die." When Chang'e heard this, his heart ached as if he had returned to the wilderness surrounded by blood wolves. He clenched his teeth and fiercely glared at Zhong Pei. Then, he looked at the masked woman sitting in front of the hall. How could he not know that she was an inner disciple of Lingering Fragrance Peak? He walked forward and knelt in front of the high and mighty Chen Chen. He said, "Senior brother Zhang is innocent. Zhao Jian is the main culprit." When a masked Chen Chen saw this, she said in a deep voice, "Stand up. Regardless of whether your senior brother Zhang is innocent or not, you have to remember that in the Lingering Fragrance sect, female disciples are respected. You don't need to kneel to anyone except the sect leader." When Chang'e heard this, he hesitated for a moment before slowly standing up. "Zhao Jian?" The masked Chen Chen asked. "Where is he?" "This lowly one is here." Zhao Jian walked out from behind Zhong Pei and bowed towards the seat of honor. Chen Chen didn't comment. Then, she stood up and walked to Zhang Xiaohu. She stretched out her hand and gently touched Zhang Xiaohu's pulse. After checking, she sighed and said, "His meridians are damaged, but his martial arts are not damaged. However, his internal injuries are very serious. Many of his bones are broken, and there are many external injuries. His life is not in danger, but he will need a long time to recover." After speaking, she took out a jade bottle and handed it to Chang'e. "This is Lingering Fragrance Peak's Yawandan pill. Feed him one. I have something to ask him." Chang'e accepted the bottle and fed the Yawandan pill into Zhang Xiaohu's mouth. The masked Chen Chen looked at Zhong Pei's face and said, "Deputy Hall Master Zhong, you don't have to do this. The truth is not out yet. I just want to wake Zhang Xiaohu up and ask him the reason." Then, she sat back in her chair and stretched out her right hand. She hooked her right index finger and said to Chen Chen, who had just stopped crying, "Are you Chen Chen? Come up and talk." Chen Chen looked at Chang'e, who was busy feeding Zhang Xiaohu the pill, and timidly walked forward. He bowed and said, "Disciple Chen Chen greets your excellency." You don't have to be so polite, Chen Chen." The masked Chen Chen nodded and said, "Tell me everything that happened in the Yulon Canyon." Then he added, "Don't be afraid. It'll be fine as long as you tell me the truth, Chen Chen." It was very easy to call him Chen Chen. Chen looked back at Chang'e and started to talk about the disciples of the Misty Hall from entering the Yulon Canyon to encountering the Blood Wolves and the two inexplicable neighs of the horses. Chen is lying. Your Excellency, Chen must have colluded with Chang'e and Zhang Xiaohu. Zhao Jian couldn't bear it anymore and stepped forward to defend himself. Shut up. Who are you to call Chen? The masked Chen was furious. Didn't you see that Your Excellency is asking a question? What right do you have to speak? Chapter 719. Although Zhao Jian did not understand the meaning of Chen is also for you to call, he knew the anger of the messenger from Lingxiang Peak. He quickly shrank his head and retreated. The masked Chen sneered. Zhao Jian, since it's your first offense, I won't lower myself to your level. If there's a next time, I'll slap you. Zhao Jian said that he didn't dare. The masked Chen asked, You said there were two inexplicable horse neighs. Is it the horse of your Misty Hall? Aren't the horses of your Misty Hall all in the woods? Chen looked at Chang'e, then at Yang Rupiying and Aunt Qin. She still said timidly, That's what we thought. We haven't seen any disciples from other halls for several days. If I'm not mistaken, this horse belongs to our Misty Hall. But didn't you say that you were all in the woods? Chen was anxious and said, That's what we thought at the beginning, but later on, when we carefully recalled it, it seems that Senior Zhao Jian and Senior Xiaozai rode out to call the patrolling disciples, but we didn't pay attention to whether they came back. Zhao Jian's face changed slightly when he heard this. He was about to go forward, but he stopped when he thought of the warning just now. The masked Chen nodded. That is to say, Chen, Chang'e, and Zhang Xiaohu discussed and felt that it was the horse of Zhao Jian and Xiaozai, but you couldn't be sure that it was them. This. Chen hesitated and nodded. Yes, I was also very scared at that time. The Blood Wolves were not far away, and I only wanted to pray that they would leave quickly. How could I pay attention to anything else? The masked Chen asked again. Chang'e is Chen, right? Are you and Zhang Xiao not sure? Chang'e thought for a moment and nodded. Yes, Lord Messenger. I'm not sure either. What about you? Zhang Xiaohu, are you not sure either? You just need to nod. It had to be said that the Yuandan pill of the Xiangism was magical. After the seriously injured Zhang Xiaohu took the Yuandan pill, he had already woken up. His breathing was long and steady, not as intermittent as before. What could Zhang Xiaohu say? He could only nod. At that time, he really didn't notice whether or not the two of them had returned to the forest. He was only guessing based on his intuition. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was still somewhat confused. Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e had also told him about this matter. But if that was the case, the one who should be locked up in the dungeon should be Zhao Jian. How could it be Zhang Xiaohu? However, when he saw that Chen had given the Yuandan pill to Chang'e, he was temporarily relieved. As long as his second brother's life was saved, nothing else mattered. What next? The masked Chen asked. Catch. Chen looked at Chang'e and said, After that, senior brother Zhang, senior sister Chang'e, and I rode the horses and ran wildly. Although the horses were more handsome than the horses of the other senior brothers and senior sisters, after the other senior brothers and senior sisters were eaten by the wolves, we were caught up by the wolves. But just as the wolves were about to eat us, there was a sudden roar that shook the whole valley. Those wolves immediately stopped and then quickly ran south. You're talking about a roar? The masked Chen asked. Was it the same as the previous roars and could be heard by the whole Yulon Grand Canyon? Chen nodded. Yes, it was the same as before, but it was changed to the direction of the south exit. The masked Chen nodded thoughtfully. What next? Chen thought for a moment and said, Then we had nothing to eat. We picked some vermilion fruits by a pool and then fainted. When we woke up, our power was greatly improved. The masked Chen smiled and said, Chen, you're so lucky that you can pick the legendary vermilion fruit. I've been looking for it for a long time, but still couldn't find it. After that, he waved his hand and said, Come here. Chen walked over obediently. The masked Chen checked for a moment and nodded. There's still a lot of medicine in your body that hasn't been refined. You're not lying. Then he asked, by the way, who thought of using elk to drive the carriage? And who caught the elk? Hearing this, Chun Shan said with a smile of exultation, Senior Brother Zhang is really amazing. When I woke up that day, he and Senior Sister Chang'e had caught 4 elks nearby. Then we went back to the woods and picked out all the rare herbs from the original carriage. We gathered them in the 4 carriages and let the elks pull them out of the woods. The masked Chun Shan turned his head and asked, Chang'e, tell us what happened at that time. Chang'e said, Senior Brother Zhang and I woke up first. Senior Brother Zhang remembered the herbs in the woods and said that they were exchanged with the blood of the disciples in the hall and should be taken out. At that time, we just wanted to take some for each of us, but when we saw elk passing by, I had an idea and thought of using elk to pull the carriage. Then why are there 4 elk and not 3? Messenger, there were only 2 of us. Chun Shan was still in a coma, so each of us could only subdue 2 elk. After all, we didn't have a third hand. Chang'e answered calmly. Not far away, Zhang Xiaohu was also in a cold sweat. This was indeed a flaw. She was rescued by Zhang Xiaohu and others when they left the valley. At that time, there were already 4 carriages, and one of them was undriven. It was not designed by her that each of them could drive 1 carriage. Chun Shan next to her also sighed. It's a pity that I didn't wake up in time. Otherwise, I could have helped Senior Brother Zhang catch 1 more elk and pull 1 more carriage out. There were a lot of herbs which were exchanged with the lives of Senior Brother Zhang and Senior Sister Chang'e. As soon as these words came out, the whole misty hall was silent. The masked Chun Shan smiled and said, Chun Shan, you've done a good job. It's a great contribution to help Senior Brother Zhang and Senior Sister Chang'e get the carriage back. Then the masked Chun Shan asked, what happened later? How did you save the disciples of the Tuada Hall and the female disciples of the inner branch? Chun Shan no longer hesitated and told the story that he had made up in the future, just like Zhang Xiaohua. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua was secretly proud. I, Xiaoxia, am good at making up stories, no worse than some scholars. The masked Chun Shan nodded and said, Chun Shan, are you telling the truth? Of course, Lord Messenger. Then, do you think Zhang Xiaohu has anything to do with the animal tide? Animal tide? How could the animal tide have anything to do with Senior Brother Zhang? Hearing this, Chun Shan's expression changed greatly. Even Chang'e next to him was panicked. Looking at Zhang Xiaohu lying on the stretcher, he quickly shook his head and explained, Lord Messenger, it's all the framing of Senior Brother Zhao and Deputy Hall Master Zhong. How could Senior Brother Zhang have anything to do with the animal tide? He has been with us all the time. When the animal tide happened, Senior Brother Zhao was also there. How could he say that Senior Brother Zhao is related to the animal tide? Since Chang'e and Chun Shan were taken to the dungeon, they did not understand what was going on at first. After Yang Ruping and Aunt Qin's inquiries, as well as Zhong Pei's indirect inquiries, how could they not understand the reason behind it? It was just that they felt that Zhao Jian and Zhong Pei had no reason to frame Zhang Xiaohu. At the same time, they faintly felt that Zhao Jian was guilty. Of course, it was just a feeling. They did not have any real evidence. The masked Chun Shan did not comment and asked, Chun Shan, Chang'e, do you have anything else to say? Chun Shan and Chang'e shook their heads. At this time, Zhang Xiaohu raised his finger with difficulty and pointed at Zhao Jian. He said something softly, but even if Chang'e put his ear next to Zhang Xiaohu's mouth, he could not hear clearly. He could only faintly hear, Gong, Gong. Zhang Xiaohu actually wanted to say that Zhao Jian had sinisterly broken his dantian and crippled his entire body's internal energy. He had a guilty conscience, but he was seriously injured and could not speak clearly. How could he accuse him? Chang'e listened for a long time and still could not understand. He could only look at the masked Chun Shan and shake his head slightly. The masked Chun Shan turned to look at Zhong Pei and said, Deputy Hall Master Zhong, you can tell us your reason. Zhong Pei cupped his hands and said, Thank you, Envoy Chun, for giving me this opportunity. Then he cleared his throat and told Chun Shan about the conspiracy between him and Zhao Jian. Zhong Pei's eloquence was very good. He was like a lotus flower with his tongue, vividly describing his suspicions. It was as if Zhang Xiaohu was the instigator of the beast tide, and the group of beasts in the Yulon Grand Canyon were under the command of Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohu's purpose in going to the Yulon Grand Canyon was to slaughter thousands of ordinary disciples of the Xiangzi cult. Until the end, Zhong Pei did not leave any trace. How could Zhang Xiaohu have such magical powers? He must have been instructed by someone. But who were these people? This question was thrown to the masked Chen. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua, who was standing among the inner disciples, finally understood why his second brother was sent to the dungeon by Zhong Pei and suffered such torture. It turned out that Zhong Pei wanted to fight for fame and gain the favor of the leader of the Xiangzi cult. The angry Zhang Xiaohua was in an incomparably bad mood. It doesn't matter if you fight for power, but to step on the corpses of small people is your fault. This kind of behavior of harming people behind their backs is even worse than the blood wolves in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Well, since I'm here, then second brother's grievances can't be in vain. Staring at Zhong Pei, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes gradually narrowed. But at this time, the masked Chen raised his head and looked at Zhao Jian. Zhao Jian, didn't you always want to speak? Now it's your turn. From now on, I will remember everything you say and report it to Lord Sect Leader without changing a word. Zhao Jian took a step forward and bowed. Thank you, Lord Messenger. Then he pointed at Zhang Xiaohu and said, They're lying. Chen was anxious when he heard this and said in a shrill voice, Zhao Jian, why do you say we're lying? The masked Chen stopped him. Chen, shut up. Whether they're lying or not, it's up to me to decide. Although he stopped him, there was some excitement in his tone. Zhang Xiaohua, who was behind him, unconsciously curled his lips. He understood Chen's mood. Talking to someone with the same name was like talking to two of himself. It was quite novel. It was exactly Chen's favorite trick. Chapter 720. Chen saw that the messenger had stopped him and didn't dare to say more. He lowered his head in grievance. The masked Chen looked on with interest and said to Zhao Jian, Tell me what you think is true. Zhao Jian's eyes were filled with deep emotions as he recounted everything he knew. In the end, he concluded, Do you know? Messenger Chen, when I saw that my brothers were buried in the belly of the wolves, my heart was broken. I also wanted to go with them. That way, they wouldn't be alone on the road back to the Yellow Springs. At least, we could hold hands and go together. However, I also know that there are more brothers in Shishine Peak waiting for me to bring back news of the brothers in Yulan Mulian. I can't be so depressed. I still have a complete body to serve, Sir Hierarch. So, I wiped my tears and hid my grief and indignation deep in my heart. I silently thought of Sir Hierarch and fled all the way back to Shishine Peak from the Yulon Prairie. Zhang Xiaohua's stomach spasmed when he heard this. He didn't expect that senior brother Zhao, who looked so bright, would be so fluent in flattery. Then, Zhao Jian changed the topic and said with great grief and indignation, After returning from the Yulon Grand Canyon, I've always felt guilty. I couldn't bring back the brothers who went with me. I regret it very much. Why is my martial arts so bad? However, before I could escape from the abyss of grief, I heard the news that junior brother Zhang Xiaohu had returned safely from the Yulon Grand Canyon. You don't know how excited and happy I was at that time. However, when Zhang Xiaohu came back, I saw the 4 carriages of spirit grass and junior sister Chang'e and junior sister Chen were safe and sound. My upright heart couldn't help but have doubts. Yes, I didn't want to doubt. I didn't want to doubt Zhang Xiaohu, who was like a brother to me. He was usually so loyal and honest. Moreover, as a direct disciple of the Misty School, he was supported by most of us disciples. This direct disciple of the Misty School, Zhao Jian's words were especially clear and heavy. However, my conscience tells me that I have to say it. I have to say it on behalf of the dozens of brothers in the underworld. They can't die in vain. It's true, Lord Messenger. Although the situation was urgent, I still cared about my brothers. My eyes never left the pack of wolves. Zhang Xiaohu, was really submerged in the pack of wolves, and there was no possibility of survival. But now he is actually standing in front of us. I don't need to say it. You should be able to think of something. If I say that Zhang Xiaohu has nothing to do with this blood wolf pack, would you believe it? Hearing this, the disciples in the hall went into an uproar and started whispering to each other. All the disciples knew about Zhang Xiaohu's matter, but because of Yang Rupiying and Zhong Pei, everyone was not clear about the details. These days, there have been a lot of rumors, and there were all kinds of versions, but no one would have thought of this because, after all, Zhang Xiaohu was able to bring the 4 carriages of spirit grass back to the Shixin Peak, which could be considered a great merit. Now that they heard Vizhal Master Zhong's words and Zhao Jian's instigation, they couldn't help but suspect. That's right, dozens of disciples have died, and Zhang Xiaohu's martial arts are not high. How could he have survived? Furthermore, he saved a lot of people and brought back a lot of spirit grass. Hearing the noisy discussions of the disciples and their distrustful gazes, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel regretful. Why didn't she think of this earlier? No matter what Zhao Jian's intentions were, what he said was reasonable. These things could not be explained very well. Although Chen Shun had already said that he had eaten the cinnabar fruit and increased his power, it was still a bit far-fetched. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel anxious. She lowered her head and thought, if things developed unfavorably for Zhang Xiaohu, how should she deal with it? Shut up. The masked Chun berated, and the entire Misty Hall immediately fell silent. Then he said, Zhao Jian, do you have any evidence for your words? Zhao Jian shook his head. No, all the disciples died in the Yulon Grand Canyon, and I barely escaped. Where's the evidence? The masked Chun asked Chun again. Chun, do you have any evidence? Chun shook his head. Then he turned to ask Zhong Pei, Vizhal Master Zhong, who do you think is telling the truth? Zhong Pei cupped his hands. I know that Zhao Jian is telling the truth, so I put Zhang Xiaohu in the dungeon. I believe Zhao Jian. Good. The masked Chun nodded and said to Yang Rupiying, what do you think, Hall Master Yang? This. Yang Rupiying hesitated. To be honest, she was also moved by Zhao Jian's words. After all, what Zhao Jian said was reasonable. Of course, his final conclusion was also a bit unimaginable. I believe in Zhang Xiaohu, Yang Rupiying said reluctantly. When the word believe came out, Zhang Xiaohua was a bit angry. Her second brother risked his life to bring back 4 carts of spirit grass. And in exchange, the Misty Hall Master trusted him so little. It was really not worth it. What about Vizhal Master Qin? The masked Chun asked again. Lord Messenger, although I know Zhang Xiaohu and I don't dare to judge his affairs, I believe in Chang'e and Chen Shun. They were brought up by me. What they say is what I want to say. Madame Qin was resolute, but after thinking about it, she was a bit soft-spoken. However, what she said was reasonable. Zhang Xiaohu joined the Misty School halfway. When he came to the Shixin Peak, he was not with Madame Qin and the others. It was reasonable to say that he didn't know them. There was no flaw in Madame Qin's words, but in the ears of the disciples in the hall, it was a bit inappropriate. The disciples' hesitant eyes became more and more puzzled. The masked Chun laughed and said loudly, what about the disciples in the hall? Who do you think is right and who is wrong? Seeing that everyone was silent, he waved his hand and said, those who believe in Zhang Xiaohu stand on the left. Those who believe in Zhao Jian stand on the right. Those who don't know who is right and who is wrong stand in the middle. As soon as he finished speaking, the disciples panicked. After a while, Zhang Xiaohua looked at them. Among the disciples, 5 of them stood on the right and 4 of them stood in the middle. Those who believed in Zhang Xiaohu stood on the left, only 1 of them. Clap, clap, clap. The masked Chun clapped his hands and asked softly, Chun, do you have anything to say? This. Chun's face was pale, and he said in a trembling voice, Lord Messenger, Senior brother Zhang is indeed. While they were talking, there was a loud bang, and the closed door of the misty hall was pushed open. The strong sunlight outside shone in, making many people squint their eyes slightly. In the sunlight, a middle-aged man with a straight back walked in with heavy but firm steps. "Who are you?" The masked Chun said angrily. "I am here. How dare you break in?" However, the man still walked into the hall step by step. His shadow in the sunlight was extremely bright. When the disciple next to him closed the door of the misty hall again, everyone saw clearly that he was Zhang Xiaohu's master, Wenwenhai, who had been abolished of his martial arts and had never come to the misty hall. Zhang Xiaohua stood behind. Although he didn't move, his heart was warm and his eyes were moist. When he saw Wenwenhai, his first impression was that gentle young master he saw in Lu Town, the young Xiaoxia, who came from the sky and saved him and his father from the hands of bullies. At this moment, although Wenwenhai was not old, his spirit was not as good as before, and his movements were no longer as nimble as before. He was not much different from an ordinary burly man, and this was the result of his inner strength being crippled. Wenwenhai walked to the front of the hall, bowed to Yang Rupiying, and said, "Master's wife." Yang Rupiying got up and returned the salute. Then she said, "Wenhai, why are you here instead of resting?" "Oh, this is Lord Chun, the messenger sent by the hierarch of Lingxiang Peak." Wenwenhai cupped his hands and said, "I am Wenwenhai from Misty School." "Greetings, Messenger Chun." He said Misty School instead of Misty Hall. The masked Chun didn't care about it. He waved his hand and said, "I wonder what Heroine has to say." Wenwenhai straightened his back and glanced at Zhong Pei from the corner of his eyes. His expression was full of disdain. Withdrawing his disdainful look from Zhong Pei, Wenwenhai said to the masked Chun, "When I came to Shixin Peak, I never entered Misty Hall. I don't care about anything on Shixin Peak. It's just that I haven't seen this disappointing disciple of mine for a long time. So, asked someone and found out that such a thing had happened. Lord Chun, just now I heard clearly outside the door. Isn't Zhong Pei trying to find the person behind Zhang Xiaohu? I came. I like to see how a cripple like me, who has lost all his martial arts, can have a connection with the beast tide in the Yulon Canyon." Wenwenhai stood there as steady as Mount Tai and looked at Zhong Pei with bright eyes. For a moment, Zhong Pei felt that he didn't dare to face him. "Heroine, I know you love your disciple, but Vice Hall leader Zhong is just guessing. Am I not looking for evidence? Then let me ask you, you're standing here. What evidence do you have to prove that you and Zhang Xiaohu have nothing to do with the beast tide in the Yulon Canyon?" Then he pointed to the disciples in the hall and said, "You see, I don't need to say anything. How many of your own disciples in Shixin Peak believe your disciple Zhang Xiaohu?" Wenwenhai looked at the three groups of disciples in the hall. Many of them were a little ashamed and lowered their heads. With a smile on his face, Wenwenhai looked around and said, "Regardless of whether you support it or not, there is only one truth. No one can fake it, right? They have the right to choose. I won't blame them no matter who they choose. On the contrary, if they go against their conscience for power and reputation, then I'm ashamed." Wenwenhai's words were powerful and resonant. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua's blood surged. She couldn't help but feel a sense of heroism spontaneously rise. Isn't it just unfair? With the 3-feet-long sword in my hand, I like to see who dares to say no. Lingering fragrance peak? Then, I'll just topple this lingering fragrance peak. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.